Was a nice concert, John.
Oh, I'm glad you liked it. We didn't know, I mean, the last week, up until the last week, we had been doing well as far as people getting sick. And then 4 people just the week before came down with COVID.
Oh, no.
And all 4 of them had a soloist part. So there was a lot of changes had to be done at the last minute. And then the morning of, somebody else came down with it. Because we all had to submit a test the day before, in the day of the concert, and take a picture and then send it to the chorus president so that we could be allowed to participate. All right, we'll give it another minute, but we do have a quorum. Hi, Ron.
Hey, folks. I'm not sure why my camera's not working, but
Oh, and Mark's here too. Okay.
there we go. Now it should be working.
All right. So why don't I'll call the meeting to order. And first we'll take attendance. Okay, Ron Assini,
Here.
Mark Doxer,
Present.
John Parsons.
Here.
Who else did I thought I saw somebody. John O'Neill present. Oh, Nora Buckout.
Present.
Okay, and John O'Neill present. And so far, Michael Coltman, and no John Sasso as of yet. Though sometimes John is a couple of minutes late. I think he has something he has to get back from kind of quickly. All right, so I noticed that we have the approval for 2 sets of minutes. So why don't we move ahead with that while we're waiting to see if others join us. I'll entertain a motion to accept the minutes of the April 20th, 2022 meeting.
All moved.
So moved, and is there a second?
Second.
The second. Any additions, deletions, corrections? Seeing none, I'll take a vote as far as those who are in favor. And Mark Doxer,
Yes.
Nora Bucko,
Yes.
John Parsons,
Yes.
and Ron Assini,
Yes.
and John O'Neill, yes. Okay, now I'll entertain a motion to accept the minutes of the May 10th meeting.
So moved.
So moved, and do I have a second?
Second. Nora beat me.
Is there any additions, corrections, deletions to those minutes? Seeing none, I will now take the vote. And Nora Bucko,
Yes.
Mark Doxer,
Yes.
Ron Assini,
Yes.
John Parsons.
Yes.
I will abstain since I wasn't at the meeting, so it wouldn't be appropriate for me to. Okay, so the minutes are accepted of both meetings. All right. The review forum activity plan is the next thing on the agenda. So
Are we being recorded?
It's recorded on RCTV, so there's no additional need to record.
Okay, I thought that there was always some type of an announcement that we had to know we were being recorded. Not that it's a big deal, I don't care.
okay. And note for the record that John Sasso is also in attendance now. All right, so Jean, are you making the presentation on the forums?
I'm sorry, say that again?
Are you making the presentation? The item is the forum activity plan? Or what's?
I think we wanted to have the UMass team probably jump in and start talking
Okay.
about that. Yeah.
All right. I'm sorry. Yes.
All right.
Go ahead, Caitlin.
Yeah, thank you, John. I think everyone knows me, but in case you don't, Caitlin Coyle from UMass Boston Gerontology, leading the project on our side, and Beth Rouleau, who's also on the Zoom, is my colleague from UMass. So yeah, we're preparing for the, I guess technically the third forum, public forum related to the Recalc effort. Planning on holding that on June 1st in the evening. I believe 7:30 is the time. similar format to the previous two formats. So we'll have folks in person as well as on Zoom. So we'll be managing sort of the hybrid format. I believe flyers have been distributed and announcements have been made. So hoping for a good turnout. We had, as you recall, good turnout during the daytime session and pretty good attendance in the evening time session. So hoping that anyone else who wants to make their voice heard will show up. But it'll be very similar in terms of format and content related to that public forum. And so that will round out sort of our three public forum opportunities for people to participate. Does anybody have any questions about that forum?
Mark has his hand
Mark.
up. Yeah.
Oh, unmute, Mark.
Mark, you're still muted.
Yep, sorry, I couldn't get to the button fast enough. Sorry. I think you said 7:30 for a start, but I believe it's 7.
7, yeah, that's
Yeah.
what we use.
Okay, yeah. 7 p.m. on June 1st at the library. I also didn't mention that. The same community room in the library.
Any questions? Anything else that we have to do, Caitlin?
John Sasso has a question, and I would say that the thing to do is to just kind of continue to to get the word out, especially if there are people who weren't able to participate at the prior two forums. This is their last opportunity to participate in this format. John Sasso?
Yeah, thank you, Caitlin. One of the things I thought we talked about, it may have been after you left last week or last time, was is the intent, is the approach to do pretty much the same questions and same kind of scenarios to the attendees? I think we had kind of thought perhaps that we might want to change it up a little bit. I don't know, maybe others had thoughts along those lines, but I kind of recall that was one of the questions we asked about ourselves as to whether or not this should be the same exact presentation, and questions, or, maybe try to go a little further on a couple other ideas, but still with the objective of being a listening session, not a telling people, but still trying to further solicit.
Yeah, well, I'm absolutely open to hearing those thoughts. I guess my interpretation was that it was going to be largely the same. Obviously, who shows up will largely dictate some of that. But in terms of hearing the sort of the prompts would be largely the same. But I'd be open to hearing what others think about what kinds of questions you would like to hear from the group about.
Thoughts? Okay, Mark.
Okay.
So I think I'm one of the things I think we talked about, John, was the possibility of breaking people into groups of some sort, if that was possible. And it kind of depends, I think, on how many people are there in person versus Zoom. And, maybe that's something to think about. I think it's really important to listen, as you mentioned, and it may be that the select board is meeting on Tuesday night, and we'll be voting on some additional funds for elder services. And I would want to make sure that your discussion, Caitlin, doesn't get kind of bogged down on kind of shorter term priority activities, which are important, but not the purpose of that meeting. That meeting is really about the longer term picture, senior center, community center kinds of questions. So just to let you know that could be out there. It could be a discussion, and I think we probably would want to table it pretty quickly, for another type of discussion.
Right. Good to know, Mark. Thanks for raising that issue. And, certainly that is our goal, to sort of hear about folks' thoughts on the Recalc project and sort of the longer term planning effort. So certainly good to know that that's happening in the meantime.
Okay, I don't see no other hands up. Maybe we can move on to a second look at the survey.
Right. Yes. So I believe all of you received it earlier this week, and I can go ahead and share my screen again, but to go through it as we did last time, but I wanted to just sort of make you aware of general general things that we did, sort of approaches. You'll notice that we cut quite a bit of content, so we're down really to about 30 questions, and the intention was that the sort of more substantive questions that are not directly about the Recalc project are, we left those in there. So things like sort of how people get information about things, as well as there's some caregiving questions, a question about sort of disability status or, function, physical function, a couple of those things that we think are important to ask about because they point to potential implications for the Recalc Center. So things like caregiving, the idea of an adult day program or needing support for folks who have difficulty getting around the community, that kind of thing. So the general approach was to pull way back on questions about the Pleasant Street Center, to pull back on some of the other types of questions that I think we deemed sort of would be interesting to know, especially for elder services, but are not perhaps in the scope of this particular survey. So that was our general approach. We appreciate all of the feedback that you all provided to us, both in the meeting as well as electronically, and we did our best to incorporate things and on balance come up with a version 2 that we think is pretty good. The other thing I wanted to mention, there was some discussion at our last meeting about not just sort of the length in terms of question number, but just sort of how long the survey would take for the average person to complete. And so Sierra, who's one of our doctoral students, did some thinking about that and some reading about that. And what she learned is that really that 10 minutes is really the sort of the sweet spot, as you will, as far as people's ability to sort of sit down, do something and not, drop off, that kind of thing. So we think that we're close to that in terms of, sort of 10 minutes being able to click through the survey or complete it electronically. But that would be the other piece that I wanted to share with you, is that sort of what our goal is, to try to get it to that, taking somebody approximately 10 minutes to complete. So those are just sort of some big picture thoughts on the edits to the survey. And with that, I can share my screen. And I thought we perhaps could just walk through it as we did last time. Hopefully it'll be a little bit of a quicker process since we've got lots of work already completed.
Caitlin, could I jump in just for a sec, just kind of at the general level?
Yep.
So first of all, very good. Really pleased with kind of bringing it together and how it flows. I have some specific comments, but kind of a general comment also. I took a step back and said, so our mission is really to talk about and define this question of senior versus community. And there are some questions that dig into that and in some detail in terms of the kinds of activities. But it also felt like maybe we haven't done quite enough in terms of asking about the community center. So things like, if there is a target for the community center, I know community center is kind of everybody, but does that mean preschool? Does it mean a teen hangout place? Does it mean after school space and programs? So those are things we haven't really probed and might be helpful in guiding some of the questions. So I think we ask quite a bit in terms of the senior center and senior activities. And we asked some physical activities, but let's take teen hangout space. I don't think we addressed that at all as an example, or kind of preschool, during school, after school. And maybe those things can be woven in to the existing questions. I'm not suggesting it's necessarily new questions.
Right.
I just want to make sure that when we're done, we can answer the question that we're tasked with. And we've got, not every bit of information, but a good amount of information to use to kind of form as the basis of our discussion. So the kinds of things that I thought we should think about would be community kinds of activities that maybe we haven't yet included for indoor and outdoor, as I mentioned, kind of, preschool, teen, after school, things like that. And what hours or days would it need to be open and usable? So I know that we do address that a little bit in terms of senior needs, but I think it'd be very helpful to have that for community center needs as well. For example, before school, during school, after school, nights, weekends, things like that. I think those would be kind of informative to our discussion also. And as if we're thinking about kind of a joint center, then those kinds of questions could be pretty important to the discussion in terms of what facilities might be used for what audiences at what times of day. So I thought maybe that's just something that maybe as we're going through the survey, maybe think about that a little bit, make sure that we're getting enough detail related to kind of both topics. And then that would kind of flavor things. But again, back to the top, I was really pleased reading through this version.
Yeah, I think those are good points and interesting, Mark. I agree with you, that we should try to, weave those in throughout the survey. I will also say though, I mean, it's a, the two forums we've had have sort of, the conversation seems to be mostly around sort of adults. I think we heard, especially in that second forum at the last, the evening forum, that people aren't necessarily interested in sort of the totally, yeah, the kid sort of, so anyway, but not to say that, that's a small group of people that showed up to those events. And so we don't want to, hang our hats on just their perspective, but, that is part of the forum conversation, is sort of people's reactions to sort of that sort of real true integrated community center. And so far, I think we've heard largely support for something that's more in the vein of an adult community center, not to say that, school groups and things like that wouldn't be able to use it. But anyway, I agree. And we can certainly be flagging places this evening where we might integrate some of that.
Yeah, if I could just add to that, I agree with you in terms of the forum so far. However, this survey is going out to the entire community. And we're really interested to hear what people have to say. We'll know who's responding, at least in terms of the demographics of who's responding. And again, I just want to make sure that we're asking the questions that'll give us the information to come back with the recommendation on how to pursue it.
Yep.
And even the questions of how much people are willing to pay may vary according to the audiences that get served. So I think they're the right questions to ask, and I'm not presupposing any of the answers. I just want to make sure we're asking.
Yeah. Yep. Makes sense. All right. Thanks.
To that, I think there's a delicate balance that I think some seniors, at least what I've been hearing, is that there's plenty of things for kids,
Mm-hmm.
And yet we want to get people with children on board without people feeling, that senior population, getting resentful of too much of a focus in that direction. So I don't disagree with you, Mark. That's just the course. And also, how about the non-elderly adults? Because I think that's a good population that, that we really need to touch base with.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure what questions will do that, but I think that's a group that we need to.
Yeah, and I'm not entirely, I agree, John, with the balance piece, because I think it is important to ask the questions, and also important to not make people feel like this is just another thing for schools and families. But I also, as far as the non-elderly adults, I think they may not necessarily even need their own set of questions, but rather we really need to think about outreach for the survey to make sure that they complete the survey.
Right.
So that's where I think we need to think about even people with high school age kids, for example, they're not empty nesters yet, but they're, moving in that direction, and other ways to try to tap into that sort of, the 40, 50, 60-year-old group. So I think that's more of a matter of targeting our outreach efforts to try to really make sure that this survey gets in front of them. Marilyn has her hand up.
Okay.
I didn't know if you're going to go through it question by question, or do you want general comments? I think it's big improvement. I just have some questions on some of the questions.
Yeah, I was planning on trying to roll through it as we did last time, hoping that it would be a slightly swifter process since we've been through it once. So I was going to walk us through again. So if you want to.
All right, I'll hold off on all except two, which are just general. One is, again, our intent had been to have every adult in the household individually fill these out, and this is still not structured that way. This is clearly designed with, tell me about your household, would they want one of these things? And I think John Parsons raised this issue. He and his wife, if she was still with us, would answer this form very differently, and I don't think that's unusual. Can we go back to the original intent, which is to explicitly say, have each adult in the household fill out a form?
Yeah, so I do think, let's see, we do have, we want to hear from all individual adults in Reading, which was added to sort of this front end instruction piece. I think maybe one of the questions you're referring to is the question about, would you or someone in your household, go to a center for
Yeah.
active living? And that question is framed that way in part because we recognize there's still kind of a little bit of a stigma or a hesitance for people to say, yes, I would go, but that doesn't mean they don't support it or they don't believe that it's important. And so it's a little bit of a trick to try to, not call them out as individuals, but really sort of say, would people in your household, is this something that they would participate in? So it's not intended to be analyzed at a household level, and it's not intended to say anything about households, but it is,
I think unless you actually say, we'd like every individual adult in the household to do a form, it isn't likely to go that way. It's going to be addressed, I assume, to household. Someone might pick it up, someone might fill it out. I can't see the harm in putting in the instructions. Please have each individual adult fill this out. And regarding the stigma one, frankly, I would ask them straight out and say, many people have a stigma about going to a senior center, in quotes. Yeah, what is your feeling on this or something like that? I'd put the question clearly on the table rather than trying to infer from it, from a question that could mean many other things as well.
Okay. Well,
Right,
we did.
but-
Okay.
I'm sorry. I said, but it's just not, we're just not focusing on the senior center though.
That's right. That's true too.
So we don't want to limit it, but
Yeah,
outside.
I certainly wouldn't want to perpetuate any stigma. I don't want to call out the piece about stigma or anything like that. I think that only gets us further into trouble.
All right.
But I'm hearing, so in addition to the sentence about we want to hear from all individual adults in Reading, you would like something more direct added?
I'd say in every household rather than in Reading.
Okay. And then in terms of that specific question, I can see, changing it to would you use a center for active living, which is also fine. I think the other sort of just piece to think about on the back end is that does, likely mean that there's a lot of people who are going to say, no, I wouldn't use it. But some, so it may come out to be that you'll have a lower percentage of people who say they would use it, which is not a bad thing. It's just something to be thinking about in terms of how you want to use these data, in terms of a whole lot of people say, yeah, somebody in my household would use it. It might be me, it might be my wife, it might be my adult kid, it might be my, me on a bad day, whatever. It could be anything, it sort of opens that definition up. Whereas if you specifically call someone out and say, will you use the center, a lot of people are probably going to be like, no, I don't. And not a lot of people, but you're opening the door to them sort of walking away from that question, which again is fine. It just means potentially lower.
It just goes back to the need to have every individual do it themselves. If somebody thinks someone else in the household would, and that somebody's filling out their own form, presumably that somebody would say, yes, I would.
But remember, we're talking about also for children, so an adult
Yeah.
filling it out for household members that would be in
Yeah.
fact children.
Right.
Yeah. And not every household is going to have multiple people that are willing to fill it out. I think we're going to feel
We'll be lucky
very
if we get
fortunate
one.
to get one person in many
Yeah.
households.
Yeah, again, I think so we can certainly make this statement more explicit about we want to hear from all individuals.
You could even just say something like, multiple surveys from a single household is fine, or something like that, if you want to put it more softly.
Yeah.
But my other point is, Mark, you said that we did ask about hours somewhere, and I don't think we actually do ask about hours.
We
in there.
don't. I think that was a suggestion to add.
Okay. I'd second the suggestion then. All right, and the rest I'll just wait till you get there. They're not big things.
Okay.
I think it's much better. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah. And also as a reminder, that this is largely being delivered virtually, so it's not getting mailed. So there won't be like one survey that gets mailed to a whole household or something like that. I think the postcards, perhaps they're sort of reminders, are going to the household level. But as far as the individual surveys, people will have to find it either in paper form somewhere in the community, or they will have to find the link and take it themselves. So I think that should also be pretty clear in terms of when someone receives gets the link, they're doing it at their own for themselves.
Okay, but aren't we sending the link to every household?
On the postcard, yeah.
Okay.
I think that's the plan. Okay. So we did lengthen this a little bit, this front end. I think there was some discussion last time about just wanting to really make sure people understand what's the what recalc is, what the process, why this is being done, that kind of thing. So we did add some language here. We also specifically called out the previous report that was done, sort of trying to say, we did a study. It demonstrated that the Pleasant Street Center has reached its limits, and we're now exploring the feasibility of somehow expanding the capacity of elder and human services. Therefore, the town is engaged in this planning process. The Recal project is, an effort to deal with, to try to think about this issue, and we're, doing this listening, and we want to hear from people about this process. So we did expand that, and then we did, add the 10 minutes piece. And again, if people have questions or they'd like assistance, they can call us or email us for that assistance. So that will be on the landing page of the electronic version of the survey. So when someone clicks the link, this is what they will see, and it'll be their sort of introduction to the survey. Any thoughts about that sort of preamble before we move on? Okay. So again, we've got that deadline, which we talked about before as being relatively soft in nature, but still important to think about as far as outreach. So we are leaving the question about how long you've lived here as a way of being able to sort of talk to see how, if at all, responses differ by tenure of residency, and about how important it is for people to remain living in Reading. Again, these page breaks and things like that will all get cleaned up in the formatting phase. Again, tonight we're just trying to confirm the content. So that's about continuing to live in Reading, which we decided, I believe that's a keeper question. And then we have number 3 is what are your greatest concerns about your ability to continue living in Reading? That's open-ended, where people can write in. And then number 4, the last in this section, is a more direct question about, do you plan to stay in Reading for the next 5 years or move? So yes, they plan to stay in my current home. Yes, I plan to stay in the community, but would move to a smaller place. Or no, I plan to move out of Reading. Any thoughts about that sort of community connection, that sort of, how people are connected to the community? Okay. So then we go right into the future senior center or community center. I guess one question is whether it might not be an or. It might, throughout the survey, we refer to it as a senior/community center. And I recognize that in this heading here, or makes it sound like it has to be one or the other, which perhaps it does not. So we'll change that. So Town of Reading is considering a senior/community center. Please rank your preference for the following scenarios by numbering each option 1 through 4, where 1 is the most preferred and 4 is the least preferred. So we talked, I think, quite at length about last meeting about this question. But as far as the options, one option is a senior center for residents age 55 plus. A second option is a fully age integrated community center. Third is a community center, including designated space and programming for older adults. 4 is no preference, and 5 is, tell us something else that's your idea. So we really stripped this down, tried to make it very simple and very, hopefully, relatively clear. So I'm curious what people's reactions are to this question. Nora has her hand up.
Yeah, no, I love that it's cleaner. The only thing, the senior center, I think the current one is defined as 60 plus.
Is it?
The Pleasant Street
Yes.
Center, yeah.
I thought they changed their mission to 55, but I will, but okay.
And this whole thing with this age I didn't know what that meant, fully age integrated, because we don't really know what these ages are.
Well, I think a fully agent, it means it could be preschool, it's like all ages. It's that sort of the true sort of community center for everybody.
So everybody the teen, the baby, the young adult, is that who? I don't know. It's like, how do we get to what they really want?
Intergenerational community center. Yeah. Right. I think, so Jean is suggesting in the chat an intergenerational community center, which I think is fine. One of the issues is sort of the difference between options 2 and options 3. So, option 3 is a community center that includes designated space and programming for older. So that's a place where it's a community center for everybody, but there is sort of dedicated space and programming for seniors. So the difference between that and a fully age integrated community center is that there isn't that designated space for older adults, and that they are really sort of integrated into, they're doing, the programs are for everybody, that kind of thing.
Oh, okay. So the seniors, well, yeah, that makes a big difference.
Yeah. So John, I see John Sasso has his hand up, but.
Thanks, Caitlin. So I have 2 comments on this. First, I'm just curious. So item 3, a community center including designated space and programming only for older adults. Would adding the word only help clarify that? And then the second comment, which is a little bit more important in my mind, is do we actually want them? So I just actually took the ARPA survey, and in there they actually required us to go in and pick the numbers and prioritize 1 through 12 in the survey.
Yeah.
And maybe that's relevant elsewhere, but this question here, I think, is a single checkoff. I don't think it's a priority question in my mind. I have no preference if they have no preference, then why rank the rest of them? So I guess certainly interested what other people think, but I think this is the one that we really want them to say, what is their priority? That's just my thought.
Well, that's interesting, because I think that's how it was the last time we spoke, was we wanted people to please check their most preferred version, and we actually switched to a rank order, because I think at least one of my interpretations of the conversation was that we wanted to know sort of what people's second and third choices were. But
before we had a little bit of a confusing the way it was written as well. The last time with I think we confused the what with the how. This is a lot cleaner. Again, I think it it says very, we can manipulate the words a little bit so that it's really clear.
Yeah.
But maybe I'm gonna. If we did, I'll take back my confusion and say, okay, I'm thinking maybe this really should be a single checkoff. But again, other people can add their thoughts to that.
Absolutely, yeah. John Parsons has his hand up.
Yeah, John Sasso said he wanted to know what other people think. I'm in agreement with his thinking. That's all I've got to say. But I agree with it.
That we want to force people to pick one.
Yes, it should be a single option thing.
Okay, I got a thumbs up from Mark. Marilyn, is your hand up from before, or do you have?
No, it's up. I just wanted to mention that since just in this little discussion, we've had to clarify what we think that those categories mean. And when we've heard it, we've all said, oh, okay, I get it. But the people reading the survey aren't going to have someone there that can explain. Maybe we need a little bit more explanation on each of these things, either in a definitions box underneath it, or a parenthetical comment or something, because if we weren't all of the same interpretation looking at it, certainly our audience is not going to necessarily interpret it the way it's intended either. So I just encourage that. And I'm all for also pick which one you want, not 1 through 4.
Okay. Okay, so we'll certainly shift back to sort of, tell us your most preferred scenario, and we can, at least on the electronic form, we can really force people to pick one. I think to the point about clarity, I think, I think definitions may be where we got into trouble last time in terms of confusing people, because there's a lot of different definitions for some of these, things like intergenerational. What do we mean? So I think that it's probably important for us to come to some agreement about the clarity of these options, without adding a lot of definitions, just in terms of trying to keep it really straightforward. So I think a senior center for residents age 60 plus, that seems pretty straightforward. People know what that's sort of your traditional senior center. I did, while we were talking, shift option number 2 to an all ages community center. What do people think about that? So moving away from the age integrated to an all ages community center. Karen has her hand up.
I'm just wondering, I know there is a need for a new senior center. Is there a community need for an all ages community center? Could we just have a senior center for ages 60 plus and a community center with designated space?
And drop the second.
To simplify it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if we're losing something by doing that. I don't know that.
Can I speak to that a little bit?
Yeah.
Sure, Jenna.
Jenna and recreation. So currently we do pay the schools $35,000 a year to use their space. And we have been denied the past several years of after school space from 4 to 6 p.m. So as the years have gone on, we've got less and less space for our programming. So I think it is beneficial in those later hours that even if it was just a senior center, it could stay open for the community and for the kids. And also if it was a community center, it's 100% a need for us. And the preschool aged parents too, they want to do things inside, and they also don't have a place to go aside from the library, but I don't really know what the programming is over there. So that's
So
just my
does that mean if we do an all ages one, it would exclude that population? Or, so when I'm looking at that, I'm thinking, is this going to exclude designated space for older adults? Community center to me sounds like it would meet the need of the whole community. But the second choice would exclude the designated spot for the older adult.
Right. That's right.
an all ages one would.
Yeah. So that's, again, to Marilyn's point, like that's how I would interpret.
Yeah, that's the intention. The difference between options 2 and 3 is that option 2 has no designated space for older adults. It is just it is a community center for all residents with various programs and things going on for people of all ages. Option 3 is that same sort of community center open to everyone, but it has a designated space and programming for seniors. So that's really the distinction between 2 and 3.
Did it say seniors? Older adults?
I'm sorry?
Should you know, it says programming for older adults, but is that the seniors?
Yes. So should it have like the same language? So the first option says for age 60 plus.
It
What
should
do you
be
think? Oh,
please-
John Parsons,
please-
sorry.
It should be please select instead of rank.
Right.
Yeah, I'll fix, Beth's taking notes and we'll fix this up as we go. I'm just making some scratch notes. John Parsons?
Thinking about, option 2, an all ages community center, say that was overwhelmingly the choice. Where the heck would our elder services department operate out of? They shouldn't, they can't be operating out of the Pleasant Street Center, because the Pleasant Street Center isn't sufficient. So where would they be?
Well, just like in Lexington, they'd be right there in the community center.
Yeah, in Lexington, their staff is there in the community center. It's not, largely the daytime programming is used by seniors, but it is not designated. It is space for anyone. It's just that the senior center staff predominantly uses it during the daytime hours, and then it's used by other groups.
To me, there's nothing there that says that they would have offices there for the nurse and for the caseworker and for all the other important people. That's just my thought.
Well, I think that's an important thing for you all to think about, is whether or not, is an all ages community center even an option on the table, if that's, and part of it is that, a lot of these details are things that have to be worked out. It's hard, and that's why this question is difficult, is because there's a lot of complexities to it. I think what we're trying to understand is people's appetite or desire for, just a senior center, or whether they're hungry for space for people of all ages, that kind of thing. And so the details about who occupies the space and who, that kind of, and when, and, all of that, I think, is stuff. Part of that, those things are things we can solicit in other questions, and then part of it is just going to have to be fleshed out in the planning process. I see Ron Assini's got his hand up, and then Nancy.
I'm almost thinking, do we need question number 2?
Yeah.
Why, if you said senior center and then a community, all ages community, including designated space, or I have no preference, and that's it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is sort of, what I'm getting at. If an all ages community center is just not really even an option, then there's no sense in using it, in making it an option. Nancy?
Actually, that was exactly what I was going to say. Okay. To eliminate number 2, because I think number 3 includes it.
Yeah. It's really the difference between a standalone senior center and a senior center that's incorporated into a community center. That's what it comes down to. And that
Right.
is one of the root questions we need to answer, I think. So anybody object to that, to removing option number 2? John Sasso, hands up.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, I don't object. I think it's interesting. The thought is, if one was to, I mean, really, what's the difference, right? That's the question that practically speaking, you just mentioned that, take Lexington, for example. They have a community center. The majority of their programming and activities during the day are really focused on seniors, which obviously makes sense. Kids are in school, working adults are at work. And then, but they still want to have some of that space that's really focused on just the seniors. You want your private conference rooms for your nurses and your social workers. You want, space for storage. You want a specific area where there might be rooms that have materials and stuff that's focused on seniors. And then, at 4:30, 5 o'clock, it trips over, and the programming opens up even further into the night and onto the weekends. From looking at a number of the surveys that came back from the team, a lot of the senior center hours are literally just Monday through Friday, 8 to 4, Friday 8 to 12, and nothing on the weekends. So I think the difference that one would ask is, well, then what is the difference between just a pure senior center and a community center that would have designated space? And to John Parsons' point, that's where we would put the elder services group and their services and programming. And I think the answer is, well, how big is it going to be, right? Because if you're going to have a senior center that's just focused on this, okay, we just look at the needs and we limit it because we're not going to expand it. But then if we want a community center, that might have a few other things that this survey can help us flush out as well. So I think this has been as drawing as this has been, I think this has been a good discussion. I think getting rid of that second one and just saying, look, we're either talking about a senior center or talking about a community center, which is going to take all of the senior center stuff along with it. I think that's what we're saying.
I think so. I think so. And I agree that this has been a productive conversation. I think the other piece of it, that the difference between a senior center and a community center that includes space for seniors is that, some of that is administrative in terms of, when you say it's just a senior center, then that's what's in there. A community center may have the veterans, it may have public health, it may have, other social workers and things like that, so that I think is one of the key differences is I can go to a senior center program and I can also get, access those other departments. But
see, I would like just at this point too, to maybe expand the thinking, because I think a lot of people think in terms of what the senior center has now. We're talking about additional space for it, but the staffing that it has now. See, I could see major advantages for having not just, I don't think having a nurse is necessarily a good thing. The nurse goes on vacation, gets sick or whatever, same thing with the case manager, and that has happened recently.
Mm-hmm.
However, if you bring in other, groups into a center, that's going to actually enhance the ability to serve elders. So maybe you'd have a couple of nurses, you'd have a couple of social workers or mental health people, the public health people coming in as well. I think we need to kind of like ourselves broaden our thinking if in fact we want the community to be able to entertain something different than what they see now.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. So I think we're forcing people to make a decision, either a senior center for residents age 60 plus or a community center including designated space and programming for residents 60 plus. They have no preference, or they want to tell us their great idea. So we are settled on question 5, which I think is a huge accomplishment. So good for us. So we did have this question, and we can talk about whether we still think we need it, which is, please tell us more about your preference for a new senior center or / community center. So this was an opportunity for people to pontificate about their choice and tell us more about their reasoning behind that choice. Personally, I mean, people will tell us if we give them the opportunity, and there's nothing wrong with that. We'll integrate the information. I think because we've simplified it so much, it may not be necessary to offer this question, but I'd be curious if anyone feels strongly about keeping. So I guess what I'm saying is my suggestion would be to drop it because it's no longer as necessary as it was prior. But I'd be curious if anyone feels differently about that. John Sasso?
Yeah, I think there's no harm in keeping this one.
There's not a lot.
I do think there may be folks that certainly might have a strong opinion and want to share their rationale and reasoning. And I think this is really the core of the survey. Let's let them tell us.
Yep. Okay. Makes sense. We got a thumbs up from Ron. Sounds good. Okay, then we ask about location, which we also talked about last time. What is your preference for location of a future senior / community center? Check only 1. And we last time simplified it to located in the downtown area, located outside of the downtown area. I have no preference on location or another option. Nora, your hand went up.
Sorry, this is on the last question. I hate to keep beating this up, but do people know what a community center is?
I think we're largely leaving that up to them. I think that, well, I mean, the answer is there isn't a very.
Do we know what it is?
Well, I think it's informed by what's the rest of the survey when it talks about what kind of programming people want.
Yeah.
You have to remember that, if people want, a whole range of different kinds of services, some for children, some for their, the older parent or whatever, all of that can be part of a community center.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where we're using the term community center, you know, it's a physical space for community to gather.
All age community.
Well, in our options, we're specifying that it is, yes, it's a place for people to gather, but it will include designated space for seniors, or it will be a senior center.
That's why I would have kept in the other, the second point, but I'm not gonna go back there.
Oh, no.
So Nora,
Well, I mean, you know, we're focusing on the seniors and lots of services and, you know, because the discussion about the nurse or the community center, I guess is it, you know, all ages? And then you're going to have all these services for the seniors included. I don't know if people know what a community center is. That's all.
and what would be the problem with that? How would that?
That you have all, you know, our intent here is we have an improved senior center with increased services, that gets lost.
Geez, I don't see how that gets lost.
I mean,
designated space and programming is
right, but then you have one. Number one is you're just going to have a senior center,
which we're assuming that people know what that is, you know.
Yeah. Okay, I can move on.
Okay.
You might put a sentence back up in the very intro saying, you know, a community center that, for example,
a place
might have space for various things or something, just to set the stage.
Yeah, but I think that's a slippery slope. I think we want to be very careful there. I don't think we want to suggest to people what it is. I think we want to ask them, which is what we're going to do as we get into later questions.
And that's why question 6 is good.
Right.
Provide some feedback.
Right. They can tell us what they think a community. Yeah. I think that's right. And then I'm seeing in the chat, Jean has the suggestion of intergenerational community center, and Jenna suggests, can we put intergenerational?
Yeah, can we put that in number 2 before community center? Does that clarify it a little bit better about what a community center might be? An intergenerational community center, which includes a designated space for programming for residents 60 plus.
I like that too.
Yeah, can I use the word multi-generational instead of inter? Just because.
Okay, yes.
I'm an academic who cares.
I still like all ages. It's so much cleaner. So,
you think just an all ages community
just
center?
All ages community center. Yeah.
Okay.
Are we okay with that, or?
I'm fine with that. Okay. All right, everybody okay with moving on from question 5?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. No, this is good. It's what group processing is all about. Okay, so on the location question, do people have, so that's really, you know, pretty simple. Is it downtown? Is it not downtown? Or I don't care.
Oh, this is Ron. Just on the third one, I have no preference on location, but somewhere in Reading, I think that's important. Right? It's kind of like, hey, it could be in Winthrop. Who knows?
Build a new center in Winthrop. On location in Reading.
We don't say downtown Reading.
So what's the difference between, do you need the third choice? If it's downtown, outside downtown, where would be that third choice?
What do you mean the third choice?
So I have no preference on the location. Oh, so it's just saying I have no preference. Never mind. I was reading it wrong.
Okay.
One day.
No, it's all right. Yeah, so it's really it's the choices are downtown, not downtown, or I don't care, or tell us other where you think it should be. Okay. Question 8 is a bit of a sticky one. We talked about it last time. So the prior version of this had a percentage So it was talking about the increase to your household's taxes by a percentage over time. And there was discussion about sort of that is a little bit risky just because percentages today are different than what they would be, in terms of percentage of household or taxes. If I said, okay, I'm fine with 2% or 5% now in 2022, but when it comes down to it, that's going to look a lot different potentially in the future. Also, a little bit of a wanting to make it more of a tangible response, so people really being able to kind of get their heads around what we're talking about as far as dollars. So we did switch it to a dollar amount, and I honestly have very little idea whether these ranges are anywhere near where they would need to be as far as being realistic. But we did shift it to asking about, please indicate if you would support a new senior center or community center if it meant an increase to your household's taxes during a set period of time by, and then we have, it's a check all that apply, sort of where's your threshold for being willing to support it if it costs you this much money. So, those were the changes that were made, and generally the rationale. We wanted to make it a little bit more tangible, a little bit more of a fixed, something that people can understand. And we wanted to also kind of keep it, relatively general, understanding that we know that a lot of that is to be determined. So I'm curious what people think about this. John Sasso.
So I just had, before I answer that, just one quick question. So on the last one where it says no increase, I would only support a new building if it came at no additional cost to residents. So someone's going to have to pay for it anyhow.
Yeah.
So,
Yep.
So I just
Got it. Mark. Oh, sorry. Were you done, John?
Yeah. And well, I don't think we have a good handle on what the dollars and cents would be. Maybe someone else would, but I think the more tangible you make it, the better.
Mm-hmm.
So a couple of quick thoughts. One, I would suggest that you only check one here, not all that apply. Kind of what's the most that you'd be willing to spend. One would assume that if you clicked 500 to 1,000, that meant you'd certainly do something less than that too. And then the question here is on how much and how do you make it more tangible. So, these are kind of interesting, except when you get to the 500 to 1,000, it's kind of a really big band. And I was just trying to think about like a school building, like the high school or the library. And I don't remember the exact number, but I'm thinking somehow it's in the $100 to $200 kind of range. That's my recollection, but don't quote me completely. So, this in some sense might be easier because you go through it. It's almost like a gym membership in terms of costs and things like that. So I thought that was good. I thought that was helpful. The only question would be kind of when you get over the $500 per year, I think we're talking about something pretty substantial. And maybe it's a community center, but so how do you figure that out? I wouldn't do a 500 to 1,000. I'd break it into a couple of pieces and not bias people. Maybe 5 to 7, 7 to 9, 9 plus, or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah, because the library and the high school combined wouldn't be in that kind of range.
Right.
Yeah. I think that they might have been, 200-300 sort of range, something like that. I'm not completely sure, but that's my recollection.
Yeah, got it. We can certainly make those adjustments to the ranges. It's 5 to 6.
I like the way it's presented though. It's concrete, $100, because I think people can relate to that. That's what they really want to know. Percentages.
Yeah, I know it's hard. Yeah. And I think when it comes down to, campaigning or trying to get people behind this kind of thing, having that eventually someday you'll have a dollar amount that says, this is only going to cost you this much or whatever. And that can be a pretty powerful communication tool.
So that range, should we do one that has 50 to 100 or something? Instead of less than 100? I don't know, Mark. You're the finance guy. I mean,
the only issue is when you have kind of a small range and then you have bigger ranges afterward.
Sure.
We're trying not to bias people into an answer. But I take your point. I mean, some small number,
Could do under 50 and 50 to 100, or I guess that's still not quite even, but
They don't all have to be perfectly
Right.
identical, but it's hard to suddenly go to 500.
yeah, you can tell that I decided that I didn't know that it could ever be. I was just like, oh, over 500. That's got
Yeah, I mean, that feels like a big number.
Right. Right.
Feels like a really big number.
Yeah, that's sort of it. Yeah. Okay, so maybe something under 100. I think I like that, Ron, in terms of it's possible. And then so something possible under 100, and then we'll split this out, 5 to 7, 7 to 9, and 9 plus or something. John Sasso.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, so I would say just leave it less than 100. I mean, so just think of it this way. So I think the debt exclusion was about 2 million a year, about 8,000 or more resident homes in the town. You do the math, that's 250. So I think Mark was very close. So, we're not going to see anything less than 100, if we start to pull out a huge amount of debt. So I think less than 100 as it is fine. And then I agree on the top end. I think, Mark, you guys make a good point. If we could break that down maybe into another category,
sure.
I think you'd be good.
Okay.
And to be clear, we're not proposing to charge people that amount. We're just trying to understand where the threshold of
Right.
payment.
I'm just trying to say what the threshold should be given the types of things that would normally show up in whether it be a debt exclusion or any sort of thing. These are the types of numbers that we're dealing with. I think these are reasonably in the realm of what they could be.
We should eliminate more than 1,000 though, right?
That's a pretty huge number.
Yeah.
Yep.
So you're gonna do 500 plus.
That kind of money.
Yeah, 500 plus might actually be reasonable. People who are willing to pay anything to get a center. Okay. All right, and then we similarly to the other question, we give people an opportunity to explain themselves, talking about what, again, sort of why they, if they say, no, I wouldn't support a building, that kind of thing, just giving them an opportunity to tell us about how cost is shaping their perspective on this. So that's an open-ended question on number 9. And then we get into a number of questions that are more specific to the kinds of space people are looking for. So we did separate it, indoor spaces and outdoor spaces. We are trying to get people to prioritize, understanding that, of course, no one's going to say no. Just because you say you want a cafe doesn't mean you don't also want a kitchen. It just means you prefer one, or one is more important to you than the other. So the emphasis is on prioritizing. Currently, we have please select no more than 5. Again, the reason why we don't just let people select all is because they will select all. And then we end up with a bar graph that looks very boring and, something that we can't make a lot of sense out of. It's 90% of everybody wants everything. And that doesn't help you guys or help the future people who are trying to make decisions about space and size and things like that. So that's the rationale for kind of pushing people to choose. And electronically we can force that. So it's not going to be a huge issue. So and then we separated them into categories. So we've got the food pieces, we've got recreation pieces, we have exercise and physical health spaces. And then this probably needs to be formatted better, but at the bottom we have, I would not use a new senior center or community center. And we have an other option. Thoughts about this question? Oh, John Sasso.
So I have a couple of comments here, and we can certainly think of how to deal with it. So first, I think I can't remember if we deliberately decided to pull some things off of here.
We tried to shorten it and consolidate it.
So I'm just going to throw these back out here as ones that are not on here, and we can decide whether we want to keep them there or not.
Okay.
The one was like a library or a quiet area.
Mm-hmm.
Another was be like a computer room. So those are two. And then, I don't know if we need to include private conference room space. I mean, I think we've kind of assumed that that's something that we want regardless. So I think you're right. Maybe we don't need to put that on there, but
Yeah, that was one that was on their private previously, and I think we sort of decided, it felt like it was assumed that that would be, that's not really up for discussion, that it needs to be there, I guess.
the other suggestion I was going to make, which I'm not necessarily sure people agree or disagree, but I would not use a new senior community center. I think we should take that off. We're asking them to prioritize just.
We don't care if they come.
I don't care if they want to go or not, tell us what, I mean, I don't know. I
think it kind of just a little bit confused the issue a little.
Yeah.
And we would get their response early in the conversation.
Yeah. So, but anyhow, like I said, whether we want those other ones on here, I'm fine. So I did have the experience recently of doing the other survey where we had to select numbers, and there was 12 things and do one at a time, and I think that would just bog us down. So I do agree that's probably not the right way to go with this. Selecting a subset and just using those as the priority, and then see what the bar graph looks like.
Well, that's what it's going to be, an aggregate of these are the people these are the things that most people really want, are these things are kind of rise to the top. So I appreciate those additions, the library quiet space, the technology space. We're moving a little bit away from sort of computer lab, that doesn't really exist very much anymore.
And whatever the right word.
But I agree, some kind of tech space or that kind of thing. So I think those are good things. This is also a place, Mark, where if there are things specific to kids or
yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
I think that's exactly where it fits.
I was actually going to say that as a last comment, is that this is the place where we would potentially think about what else might we want that would be more general communities related. And to be honest, I hadn't really thought too much about that. So I think this would be a place for us to think a little bit about whether there's something that's missing from this that we would want to add that would be more reflective of a broader use.
Yeah, and there's some other hands up which we'll get to, but I would appreciate if people have ideas about, so this, you'll notice this this question is about the types of space. So it's not about programming. It's not saying I want programs for after school or whatever. So I think we would want to just think about what kind of, so it could be, additional space for after school programming or something we'd have. So I'm a gerontologist, so I don't know, I don't know. I just might need some help in terms of thinking about what those examples would be. So if people have ideas, I'm open to them, but Marilyn and then Nancy. Mark, is your hand up from before? Or
Nope. It's
up
for
again.
now,
Okay.
and it was maybe answering the question that we're talking about here. So appreciating that this is identifying space and giving some examples to help people focus. You have the EGs, like under the large group activities, concerts, lectures, parties. So it may be that something like a hangout space or a teen hangout space or something like that as part of the EG could be something that fits. Because if you create a new category, then it starts, to your point, sounding more like an activity as opposed to a space.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And I think we can ask later in activities, but I think somehow incorporating it, and I think it probably fits best into the large group, unless other people have a different take on that.
Just quick, Mark, while you said that there's lobby or lounge space for informal socializing. So I think that's maybe more, for that particular comment you made.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that could be a great place for it too.
I mean, that could be EG drop-in, teen drop-in center or.
And if we do that, I think this would be a good one to give two examples. So one is, I think, what we've been thinking about under a senior center, which is just a small, quieter social space. And the teen hangout center, I think, would be pretty much the polar opposite.
I was gonna say that's not quiet or I got it. Okay. So something that illustrates space for kids to hang out after school, before school, whatever, and then a quiet, library quiet space as a separate option. Got it. Okay. Marilyn and then Nancy, and I see Ron's comment in the chat there. Marilyn, why don't you go ahead?
Mine's pretty simple. I would ask that we change the heading recreation to be recreation / education / I don't know, at least recreation and recreation, education, entertainment.
Right.
Because educational programs are some of the most popular ones in the senior center. So,
Mhm.
and actually the other point is, and I bet that's something Nancy might want to talk to, is the notion that computer labs are sort of not so much the thing anymore. I think they're very important, but I'd leave that to Nancy. She knows that area far better than I.
Right. Well, I think the point about having space for people to engage in technology is important. And I think we just have to, I just think the way that we're phrasing, thinking about, that I think that's definitely something we should ask about, whether it's a set of machines that are publicly available, or whether it's, you loan an iPad to somebody who's able to use it, whatever, or you bring your own, whatever. Or if there's a 3D printer available, that kind of thing. I think technology space is an important.
Right. I think there are a lot of people who come because that's where they get, they don't afford their own internet, for example, and they'll come and do whatever at the computer center, and they may not have the equipment either. Chances are, if they haven't got the internet. So anyway, again, Nancy would know best on this.
All right, Nancy.
What you both said is true. Pre-pandemic, that computer room downstairs used to be full. Well, at least on Thursday mornings, a lot of people came in, and there were a number of people that came in to check their email or to print out their plane tickets, because just as Marilyn said, they didn't have a computer at home, or they don't have access to the internet. So so that room pre-pandemic, I think, was used quite a bit, just for that reason. Now people do bring a lot of their own devices with them. So they might bring an iPad, or they might bring a laptop. So space for people to kind of spread out. But they a lot of times will do it because they can access the Wi-Fi. Yeah. So that was it.
All right, thank you. John Parsons.
I spent a fair amount of time at the senior center, and I certainly did pre-COVID. And I just want to back up what Nancy said. That computer room was jammed. There were times you couldn't get on a computer.
Okay. Yeah. Great, thanks. And then Ron, your comment about eliminating, health areas. So, space for blood pressure checks and things like that, I think is well taken. I was scrolling because we tried to sort of pull apart programs and services as sort of separate. So we want to hear about what kind of space do people want for programs, and then I think we pull out the services a little bit later on, but I think it'll be important to, so we don't have something specific about, space for nursing. I think, so we can talk about where we might integrate that. I think the other question is kind of to the private. I was noticing we did incorporate the private meeting space later on. Part of this too is that some of this stuff is maybe not even negotiable. Like there will have to be private offices, or there will, that kind of thing. It's what we're trying to do is understand what's going to bring, to get people excited. And so anyway, we can try to figure out a way to incorporate that, but it is not specifically in here as far as space goes. Jean has a hand up.
Thanks. So I was very involved in a lot of the public health activities for many, many years. It fell under my department.
Yeah.
And anytime we did any kind of COVID related shots and vaccine and flu clinics and all of that, these being able to set up in a big room, we already have the dividers.
Yeah.
So we're already equipped to do all of that and break it all down. So in my opinion, what's those kinds of it leans more towards an activity or an operation and less towards a space requirement, because public health has their own space over at the police station, or they will shortly. And we do clinics, we do things in public health everywhere, schools, gyms, you name it, you know, especially after the pandemic. And I think a lot of things are going to change with going forward in the future. We're going to use some rooms in a different way in the future that we're thinking about how we're going to use them now.
Well, I would say universal, sort of the multi-purpose use and the universal, that's what we're going for, right? Because we want to be able to adapt. And I am reminded of senior centers that I've toured in the past where they open this was a pub, you know, is a exam room that's now a storage closet because the public health nurse comes once a week and she never sees people in that room. So I get that. Nora?
Yeah, I'm a nurse, and the privacy issue, especially if you're going to expand your programs to, I don't know if it's counseling, or even today I was there for the pharmacist talk, which was excellent, but there really needed to be a privacy section because people were discussing their medications. So I wouldn't assume that that's built into a plan, but I think the privacy and the nurse's office and just that's really important for the nurse.
Yeah.
And the
Got it.
client.
Okay.
Yeah, and to that point, I would say that falls more under staff space planning.
Right.
Because
Okay.
we have that now with the staff, and we know that we don't have enough private areas for staff to work with seniors. So I would suggest that falls more on the staff analysis.
Okay.
Yeah. So for question 10, I have that we're going to incorporate some EGs that are relevant to kids, families, sort of the broader age range. We're also going to add technology space, library quiet space, and I think that was it for this. Is there any other comments about question 10 before we move on? Okay. Question 11, it's a similar question, but we're talking about outdoor space. What kind of outdoor space would you prioritize in a new senior center / community center? Please select no more than 5. This is again a place where we have some EGs, but there's definitely space if we wanted to include. Actually, you know what we had in this one in a prior iteration, we had like a skate park as one option, and I think even a dog park was an option, or a dog area or something like that. But anyway, those are so we could add some EGs that are a little bit more specific to people of younger ages. But there's sort of the picnic tables, outdoor dining, benches or comfortable outdoor seating, a gardening area, outdoor exercise, sort of outdoor gym equipment, team exercise space, so baseball courts, pickleball courts.
There's no baseball courts.
Oh, geez. What do they call those things? Fields? Okay.
Fields, yes.
Thanks.
But also I was interested that there was no things like bocce or badminton, croquet. And you have these fields. I mean, there's no question that Reading needs more fields, but I don't know if that's appropriate for this survey. I mean,
well, we have multi-purpose grass fields. We could.
I know, I'm not sure what was the rationale behind that, as opposed to, you know, recreation certainly knows that we need that, but is that appropriate with a community or a senior center? I'm just tossing it out as the question. It just kind of.
Well, I think the question is whether people, you know, if there is a need for more of those kinds of fields, and they're saying, you know, the community center, you know, that it could, depending on I mean, that dictates location, it dictates, you know, some of the decisions that have to be made. But I guess I would say I don't know. I mean, I think it's to ask about sort of if someone wants to prioritize having grass fields at their community center. It seems logical to me, but I'll put it out there. Mark?
So I think, John, your point is great on things like bocce. in terms of outdoor, but not quite as, big time exercisey, if I can put it that way. Might be worth its own category. It takes space.
Lawn games, that sort of thing.
Yeah, lawn games. Maybe lawn games is a great way. Yeah, and cornhole run, absolutely. I mean, lawn games are, it's a smaller amount of space. It's not running around necessarily, but it could be a great use of an area. And then in terms of the bigger issues, so this is a good one for us to talk through a little bit. So to the extent that it could be an all-encompassing community space, if people answered, I want all these fields and all sorts of other things, and then kind of had a hamburger budget that goes with it, maybe we can't get there.
Yeah, I mean, on one hand, I'm not sure people are gonna miss that. Like, if we took that option off the table, I'm not sure people would be like, oh, why didn't they ask me about fields?
And you have the choice of other.
They can tell us other. So I'll put it out there that the proposal is to remove the multi-purpose grass field, soccer, football, replace it with lawn games, e.g. bocce, horseshoes, cornhole, that kind of thing. What do people think about that? Anybody opposed? Okay. Okay.
Just one more thing. The second to last question, do we still need that?
I would not use, yeah. I think we were trying to avoid people just skipping entirely, but yeah. Sort of as a non-applicable, but okay. So this is a question similar in structure, but it's asking about which of the following accessibility features would you prioritize in considering a future senior center or community center? And we separated them into the sort of facility aspects, understanding, and I know we talked about this last time, I mean, understanding that whatever happens, is going to be accessible. Like, nobody can build a new building without some of the sort of very basic accessibility functions, but we were trying to pull out some of the more fuzzy accessibility features that are important in terms of things like transportation and parking and cost, that kind of thing. So we're not by any means suggesting that, anyway, I just want to make that clear. We're using the word accessibility, but it's meant to be a little bit of a softer version of that. So we separated them into facility features and then program and service features. And the facility features, door-to-door transportation, no or little cost to programs, ample parking, dedicated space for older residents, and then the facility being open in the evenings and on the weekends, which Marilyn, I know you really, and it's an accessibility, it's an issue, but you have something to say. Would you like to add?
I just had a question. I can't imagine that we'll end up doing a lot with the existing senior center, but if we did, is it still the case that old buildings get grandfathered in and are not required to meet all of the accessibility issues? Because I know certainly when the Disability Act was passed, many buildings that amaze me were grandfathered in. I mean, one that kills me is Barnes and Noble in Burlington does not have a handicapped accessible entry. I mean, it's flat, but there's no button. It's because it was there already. It used to be a Howard Johnson's. So I just want to make sure that we don't be too complacent about we're guaranteed we're going to get it because it's new, because that building is, as we know, historically designated. And I suspect that's part of why we're facing some of the problems we've got now, is that they kind of got a pass on it because it was an old building. So I just want to caution on it. That's all.
Okay. Yeah, I hear you. I think, for this particular question, we are talking about this sort of future, this new thing.
Yeah.
And so I think we're wanting to kind of keep our eyes on the prize there.
Right.
And as far as the grandfathering, I'm not an expert on that, and I don't know the answer, but
all right. I just wanted to make people aware. I'm fine with the way the question is here,
Okay.
but I don't know that we are correct in saying it would definitely not be an issue with new construction. If we were doing something at the current senior center, my guess is there's a clause that says, oh, well, no one had handicap buttons in 1812, so you don't have to have one. So that's all.
Got it. Okay, John Sasso and then Jean.
So a couple questions there. So just the first one is just a clarification. Can we say more remote parentheses online programming? Just so people are clear about that. That's the first thing. The second thing, should we add, or can we add, do we need to add free Wi-Fi as a potential selection for folks to ask about? We were just talking about technology. I think, again, no assumptions here, but that might be one. And then I guess my preference on this one is two things. One is we have this private space for consultation with public health nurse or social worker. I think we as a group, certainly me personally, think that's a non-negotiable item. So I almost think that let's not like waste a bullet in our ammo here. Let's take that out, because we already know that we're going to put that in no matter what anybody says.
Yeah.
The second, more general thing is, I almost think we should get rid of these categories in this particular one, because these are all just general accessibility, and make them consistent with the last two. Pick your top 5 total.
Just the whole list.
The only other item I was thinking about here, although I know we have some questions further down about disabilities and access, like, for example, the headsets for hearing impaired or things like that. I don't know if we necessarily need to add that here, but where we do have the disability question.
Right.
So that's, or sign language person or interpreter at all programs, or those are types of things that could also potentially fall under this category. But since we do ask those questions later on, I'm a little torn on whether we need to add them here or not.
That's a really good, all of those are good points, John, in terms of sort of removing the headers and just kind of making it one contiguous list. I think dropping, it's a non-negotiable that we will have the private space, so we'll drop that. I do think I did have that same thought about sort of, headsets and, even for non-English translation kinds of things. Some of that stuff, the decision in my head was sort of trying to focus on things that would have to be in place in the physical building. So, you can get headsets and you can hire an ASL interpreter kind of, but making sure that when you're building the building, you have the capacity for remote programming in every room. You have, so I guess that's where I was making the distinction. And I didn't want to get too far in the weeds, because once we start talking about.
That's fine. No, I'm again, I wasn't.
But I agree that it's important.
I was just trying to think about it that way. So
yeah.
No, I think that's all I had for comments on this one.
Okay, thank you. Jean?
I had a couple of the same comments that John had. So, but the one thing I just wanted to talk about for a quick minute was the way that the historic building is treated for construction. I've been involved in a lot of renovations of historic structures, large projects, and I talk a lot to facilities about the rules around that. And it's my understanding that once you cross a threshold into an order of magnitude on a project, you are on the hook for all accessibility improvements and that kind of thing. So I can't imagine in a kind of thing we're talking about that we wouldn't be crossing that threshold. And it's even the way they interpret it for the state of Massachusetts, it's over a 3-year window. And it's based on the assessed value. So so it's pretty strict. And then yes, you can go and seek waivers. You can apply to the Architectural Access Board and seek waivers from certain code requirements, handicap code, energy code. They're not easy to get. So I just want to throw that out there. Thanks.
Thanks, Jean. I learned something. Appreciate that. Mark.
Just a quick comment to echo yours, Caitlin. I think we got to keep our eye on the prize here. We're not really talking about methods of construction or waivers or anything else at the moment. We're talking about what are the space needs and kind of the core needs that we want here for a new to us facility, and everything will have to be worked through when we get there.
Yep. Yep. Okay. Okay, so we're removing the headings from this question. Yep, I think that was that was it on this one as far as edits. But I know my colleague Beth is taking really good notes.
Are you okay to add Wi-Fi? Is that
Oh,
one?
that's right. Yeah, I think that makes sense.
But see, my question on that is, I would think that would be a given.
Yeah, well, that's true.
See, I would like to see that as just something that automatic, you know, that you would be doing, just like you have it at the library, you know.
I would be okay with that as well. Just, you know, because I think.
Yeah, no, so I don't disagree with the point. I'm just, I don't even want to, you know, have that up as a, you know, you don't have to have it. I would, you know, I want to see that as built into, yeah, we're just going to make sure that it's free Wi-Fi for anybody who utilizes the facility.
Yeah, the only reason, one reason I can see to include it, aside from the obvious, which is that it's an important aspect of equity, but is that people might be like, oh, if it's a free Wi-Fi plate, maybe I'll go. That could be like a
as a
sort of like
attractive feature.
Yeah, or something. People who may have not ever thought about going to a place, then they say, oh, well, if there's free Wi-Fi, maybe I'll go. But that's really maybe not a great reason, but it's a reason. Mark, you're on mute.
It said unmute, but then it remuted. Sorry. Think we should be careful if we're asking people to only pick 3, and I think almost all of us have said that that's a given. Maybe that's not worthy of one of the 3. Just a thought.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm sorry, can I add one more question here?
Yeah.
So just going back to Mark's thought about expanding this to community center. What about, again, I don't know if this falls into the case of, but what about like babysitting? You know, if we're talking about having adults coming into evening programs and I don't know. I'm not sure. I don't want to know how far down the path we want to go here, you know, to your point. So, but I was just trying to, are there any other other expanded type of, again, accessibility features that we're talking about here that would go to the expansion of beyond seniors, but other age groups to be able to use the building?
Would you say on-site respite care? Because then it could be for
anybody.
People have a need for an older adult that they're caring for.
Yeah.
This might be better in 16 or 17 also. Remember 16 and 17 look at services more specifically.
Yeah.
It may be that something like
it's absolutely an important point. Yeah. It's absolutely an important point. I think the respite, the care, child, you know, whether you're talking about kids or aging parents, aging adults, but I think maybe not this question, but as Mark said, you know, we should make sure that that's adequately reflected in the other questions because it's definitely important. So let's continue on, and if it's not adequately addressed, we can edit it. Marilyn, I'm thinking of you on question 13, and do people feel, so if I changed, you know, if this center was developed, how likely would it be? How likely?
I don't have so much of a problem with it since we've got language at the top encouraging everyone to do their own.
Okay. How likely would members?
And I understand what you're getting at. So
okay,
it's fine. It's really 2 separate issues. As one is encouraging everyone to separately reply, and this is getting a broader issue, I think.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so is everybody okay with 13? How likely would it be that you or someone in your household would use it? Okay. Let's see. Okay, so moving into programs and services, we ask this question about have you ever traveled to seniors or community centers in other communities to participate in their programs? Yes or no? If yes, why did you go there? Just to kind of, you know, get a sense of what is motivating people to go to other places. you'll notice that we removed the Pleasant Street Center questions altogether, again, in an effort to try to keep looking ahead. This is a possible real estate issue. If this question was not deemed sort of absolutely necessary, it potentially would free up a bit of space. But I'm wondering if people feel like this is still a good question. Nora?
Yeah, I'm not sure the value of the question. You can sort of assume why they went to other places, right? I mean, I'm not sure what.
Yeah, the sort of essence of the question is ultimately we want to understand what's going to get people to come to to a place, and by understanding their current behavior, what takes them to other centers, that gives us a glimpse into what is motivating them to do so. But I agree that it's not central.
And I think we know this already because they've already told us.
Okay.
But that's just it's a big question with a lot of choices that I'm not sure what it really gives us.
Okay.
I like the question.
You like the question, Ron?
I do.
I think it also resonated with some select board members. Maybe Mark can confirm that.
No,
The
they've
fact that
mentioned
people
it.
from Reading had to,
right,
felt the need to go elsewhere because they didn't have what they wanted here.
And I think what this flushes out is based on the responses. We don't know if people are going to other places. Maybe they are, maybe they're not. But
no,
it'd be a
but we've
collection of
asked before. That's come up in the survey.
But this is going to the broader community now, right?
Yeah.
So
yes.
I think this is an important question. I think we'll get an idea of the extent of this because we don't, we have a lot of
people
information. The select board, I think the feedback from them was we want data. This is a really good data question. And it does actually go to the point of, well, what not only are they going, but why? And we may know, people may have told us some of those reasons, but I really think this is a good data question that we need. And even if we think we know it, I think this is relevant to the task at hand.
Yeah. Speaking as a select board member, yes, agreed.
Yes. Okay. All right. John Parsons.
I'm not so sure there shouldn't be another category here. Just for two examples, when my wife was alive, she went to art classes in Reading, and she also went to Wilmington just to supplement her art lessons.
More frequently.
I play bridge in Reading, but I go play bridge other places just to supplement my bridge activities. Maybe mahjong players, maybe chess players, maybe cribbage players, or other people are. Maybe people are going to Zumba somewhere else because they want to do it twice a week, and Reading only has it once a week.
Yeah, that's a good point, John.
Okay. Then I'll shut up.
No, it's good. I know that happens. There are people that tour the area playing a particular game that they're of interest. So we'll add that in as an option. Okay. So then this is another question. This is a question about services. It's rating the importance of the following services to you or a member of your family. We did separate things into services. This is about services. So it's sort of beyond. So it's not really about space. It's really just about sort of what are the valuable services that we want to have provided in the community. This would be a place. So we have assistance with local and state programs, transportation, wellness, nutrition programs, professional services, support group and caregiver referrals. This could be a place where respite could be included. But it's really just trying to get a value. We want to understand sort of what are the things that are really important to people as far as the services that are offered. So if people have questions on this, thoughts. John Sasso.
Yeah, I think John Parsons said this last time on this question. These two questions here in particular are really critical for the community to know. And I really like the questions.
Mhm.
I look at them and say, these are things we should know like now, regardless of recalc.
Right.
From that point, they don't necessarily. So I'm going to ask this question, and I'm not asking it to be confrontational, but I'm just like, okay, so what do these two questions do in terms of supporting our charter of determining whether we need a senior center, new space, or community center, or kind of those requirements? Because all of these things are great, but I don't necessarily think they really target us too much in that direction. Now, again, I love the questions. I would love to see us get answers to them, but I just want to make sure we use, I just want to make sure we use this survey to its full effectiveness and not have people kind of, lose off on it. So
Yeah.
I'll ask other people, let them comment, but I like the questions, but I have to, to be legitimate, I have to ask, is it really relevant for what we need right now?
Yeah,
Yes,
I
sir.
appreciate that. And I will say for 16, this is another way to think about it, is that most of these things are going to continue to be offered no matter what happens to the bill. It's sort of, again, that sort of essential, like these are essential services, or these are, anyway, so part of the question is, if we know that these things have to continue being provided, why are we, asking people? Anyway, so I hear you on that point. Karen and then Mark.
I do like these questions. I like having this data. I think that will be good to have. I'm only wondering if there are more services that we should include here, thinking not just about the senior center, but as a community center. So like the rec department said that they wanted to have more services. I'm wondering if that's something that we should include here.
Yeah, I think this would be the place for that. I think in terms of before and after school programs, that kind of thing. We could even include the sort of, and we are going to include a respite. So that is an edit that I have notes on, is to include a respite, whether that's for older people or kids. Mark.
So I'm going to need to speak out of both sides of my mouth here for a minute. I largely support what John's saying. I think that these are critical questions to understand. I'm not sure that they help us in our mission, with a couple of exceptions. For example, nutrition. The discussion about regular lunch programs or things like that could impact the facility pretty dramatically. And so I think that something like that would be really important. Daycare. And in two versions, adult daycare and child daycare. So kind of thinking the senior side and maybe more the community center side. So I'm wondering if there's a compromise here. Rather than trying to make this an exhaustive list of everything we can think of in terms of services, that we highlight those that really could have a big impact on the space requirement. And I fully agree, John, as you said, we need this information. We, the community, need this information somehow, somewhere. But I'm not sure this is the right place, the broad list. I'm just not sure this is the right place for it either.
Well, I would like to say that, I also had the same exact question as John Sasso. And with the exception that Mark just mentioned, I think this would be great, like, especially for a council on aging needs assessment. This is something that you definitely need, should have. And I would, if this is the only way to get that rather than having a separate survey, then I would, back off. But yeah, I do think it is a little bit off from what our main focus is, with some exceptions as far as the daycares and the nutrition program.
Right. So if we were to retain on this list, I'm going to throw transportation in there just because of things like parking and garages and whatever. But if we were to retain transportation, nutrition programs, and then instead of the support group, and add the rest, the adult daycare and the kid daycare to this question, relative to services, and that was it. And so we would, it's because assistance with programs, wellness checks, things like that, professional services, those can happen in those private meeting spaces that, essentially we're assuming will be there. So anyway, how do people feel about that? So this would be a shorter list. It would be transportation, it would be nutrition, it would be childcare and adult day health.
So wellness services would not be in there, or would be?
I'm proposing not to have it in there, but only because of if we're thinking about things that impact the space and we have private space, or, the other question had the thing about private space.
I don't want to go against what I just said to some extent, but I guess I would ask, COA Elder Services. So if we take this stuff out, again, because I think we've all in our hearts feel that this is really good data to get.
Right.
Will you guys be able to go off and get this data, or are we, we kind of the last bastion to be able to get it in an effective manner at the moment? To John O'Neill's point, if we're it, then I would support keeping it. But if not, I still believe it's stuff we need to know. But if it does kind of drag the survey down a lot, because there's a lot here for folks to look at. So I guess that's the question I would ask, is if there's some thoughts about doing that. I mean, I kind of believe the answer to that question is no at the moment, but I'll at least ask the question.
Marilyn?
I think it's an opportunity that I would be sad to see us miss, if for no other reason than so much effort's going into publicizing what we're doing.
Question relative to services, and that was it. And so we would, it's because assistance with programs, wellness checks, things like that, professional services.
That was weird.
That was weird.
Yeah, that was very weird.
Just heard myself again. I don't know what's going on with that, but sorry.
Well, then I'll repeat myself again. I hate to miss a good opportunity. It
Yeah.
doesn't strike me as bogging down the survey terribly. Are we talking just about question 16 or 17 here?
I think right now we're just talking about 16.
Okay. I think it also might help understand 17 better if we have 16 there as sort of, okay, this is what I actually can't see the question, how it's worded on 16 on the screen. If you could scroll a little bit.
Sure.
There it is. I like 16, and I think it is a good question for the future as well, because it's not even asking, are you using it? It's just saying, is this important to you? I think it does give an outlook on what the family thinks they might need for themselves in the future now. And, maybe they don't use these things at all right now, but they could be really important. I'd recommend we could keep it unless it's a real deal breaker of our thinking it will hurt the integrity or response on the survey.
If you want to cut it down just a little bit, maybe the last one is not needed in place of the child care and daycare or adult care.
Yeah.
If you want to save a little space.
Yeah, I think that's fine. So then we'd really only be adding one option to it. Yeah, I like that.
And I still like the data. It's supporting data. It's just that's I just look at it. It's still a data point for us to continue to reinforce it. And what I also like about it, I know the survey is getting long.
Yeah.
But it also shows the community that we thought about this quite a bit, and we're addressing. We understand the needs of the community, and I think the survey. I know it's lengthy and everything, but we're capturing a lot of stuff here, which is important that people don't even know about.
Yeah, it's a bit of an education tool. Yeah. Okay. John Parsons.
Yeah, I don't know if Ron just changed my thinking a little bit. My thinking before that was we are making the survey quite lengthy, and I think we already know the answer that we're going to see, that every single person would just go right down and put either 1 or 2 on this, because we all know how important all of these are. I can't imagine getting to 3 or 4 a 3, 4, or 5 answer from any senior. Maybe other people of a younger age would, but I think everybody knows how important that is.
I think there are a lot of seniors that don't use the senior center, John, that might not find those things that important.
Yeah.
Because they get it elsewhere.
And I think part of it too, it's a little bit of demonstrating, I don't know if need is the right word, but it's demonstrating sort of where people really feel strongly about some of these programs. And I think that is part of our task, is to try to understand the needs of the community, or sort of what they value, what they think is important to be offered. So I do think it supports that a little bit too. So I think the current proposal is to remove information and referral as an option, add childcare, and add adult daycare to 16. Mark has his hand up.
Just a quick comment. I think that I've got two suggestions, or a comment and a suggestion. The comment is, I think we need to get ourselves comfortable that a survey that's going to take people 20 minutes is still going to get us enough responses. There's no way this is 10 minutes. Not possible. I question if it's 20. I think it's longer. And I think we just need to, at some point, decide, where we're going to make trade-offs on things. And maybe what we should do is, where we see a question that we agree has tremendous value and adds a lot of helpful information, but it's not exactly spot on to recalc. Maybe for the moment, we put a little star next to it, just so we know which one it is or which ones they are, because I think there are others later on we might get to. And maybe what we need to do is trade off between some of those and just decide which is which. I just think that if this is 20+ minutes, people are going to self-select in terms of who's going to be willing to spend that much time. People are, when we produce videos, the maximum time we can produce a video, audio and video, is 5 minutes. So the notion of sitting with a piece of paper for 20+ just means that a bunch of people aren't going to get through it and aren't going to finish it. And it's important, I think, to get lots of people responding, and balance that with how much depth there is. I think we need to get ourselves comfortable. And Caitlin, was interesting that you talked about that kind of 10-minute notion. It may be we have to go a bit beyond that, but I just want to be careful we don't go, all this is great and I'd love to have it, but I just don't know you can do it in one.
Good point, Mark. I'm proposing a little activity that we can do perhaps at our next. So one of the next step that we can take after we finalize the content is I can actually put it in our online system, and I can share the link without making it public. Just send it to this group, and we can take it and we can time ourselves, and we can then perhaps have a discussion about how long and cumbersome it was, and then maybe have that discussion about cutting things. Does that sound like a plan? Okay.
Can we open it up to other people, like in the household, who haven't been through this?
Oh.
And just it's new to them, so just to see how long it takes them. We've reviewed these questions, we know what they are and everything else, but someone brand new who sees it for the first time, just a thought.
Yeah, I mean, I'm okay with that as long as it's like within, a household.
Right.
Not sharing it sort of like on social media or something.
Exactly. Yep.
Is everybody okay with that if 1 or 2 people in the home take it? Okay. Yeah, then I think that's fine. So next, once we get through this conversation, we'll clean it up, we'll add it out, we'll get it online, and we'll share a link, and then we can have another conversation about length. Nancy and then John.
I just want to also note the time and get some idea of how long people are willing to go.
This evening.
This evening, yes.
Yeah.
I think we need to finish the survey.
We do.
That's the priority.
Yeah.
Once we hit the demographic section, it'll go quick.
Yeah. Can I just say really quickly, I printed the survey out and I hadn't attended the first meeting. So, and I did the survey within 10 minutes and I didn't have any idea what the questions were beforehand. I think what happens is we're belaboring a lot of these questions. So it seems like it's going to take people a long time. The other thing I was going to suggest, I mean, my experience was it was 10 minutes. I was also wondering if maybe when we get to the point where we're at the final version, perhaps we print out some paper copies and find a couple of people at the Pleasant Street Center who would be willing to take the survey as kind of a test run. Just a thought.
Yeah, I think it's, thanks for sharing your experience, Nancy. And I'm okay with that if the group is okay with that, again, provided that it's not, hundreds. But a handful would be fine.
Yeah, and maybe make a copy for them so when they do get the survey, they can compare what they did last time versus what's in. I don't know. Just
No.
Yeah, I was gonna say I would just count it as they did it already, but
okay. Oh, just to time them, for instance.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
yeah. John Parsons.
Yeah, just another suggestion of people to use. Only about half the people on the Council on Aging have been coming to these meetings. So if we send it out to the other half, that would be some other people that I think would be willing to help us out.
Yeah,
Great
that's a
idea.
great way to engage them, John. Thanks for that. Okay, 17 is about programming. So this is not about space. This isn't about services. This is just about what are the kinds of things would you like to do with your time, sort of thinking about expansion. And they are sort of categorical with some examples. This is perhaps a little bit ahead of where we want, this might be jumping the gun a bit, which I'm seeing some head nods. It's, yeah, so we could cut it because it is sort of down the road, but it is also
Asterisks, as Mark said earlier, put an asterisk on this one.
an asterisk on this
Yeah,
one.
but I think that this could give us an idea of some space.
It's the same kind of thing where things sort of
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, say we have a lot of people that check off performance. I mean, that kind of tells you need a place with a stage, or a lot of people check off outdoor activities. So it could give us some information. But other surveys have also collected this, past surveys have collected this information too.
Okay. Mark.
If I could just add, I think this is another area where when we start thinking about more of a community center, we'd start thinking about adding some other items to the list.
Right.
So I think this may need to be an asterisk version, and maybe we should add a few
Integrate those
community center
examples.
oriented
Yep.
activities as well.
Yep. Okay. So we'll put an asterisk on this. We'll try to incorporate some more sort of more broad multi-generational examples into this, and we will see how the test run goes. This is sort of the last, I think, sort of substantive question, before we get to the demographics, but we ask about where people find information, whether they have internet access, and sort of whether they know people in town, if they need assistance or help with things. And then we have that question about feeling like local policy makers, again, consider the interests and concerns of older adults. So this is really sort of about information, communication, connection to the community. Jean, your hand went right up.
Yeah, the Reading Post for the online newspaper, is that the name of it? It's the Post, okay.
The Patch is the other one. I don't know. That's
Yeah,
another one.
yeah, Patch is a popular local online newspaper.
The Patch, or I'll figure it out.
It's called The Patch, and then it's
called
for
The
all
Patch.
communities, but it's kind of a summary of news.
Okay.
We also now have a town manager's newsletter, not to get too much into the weeds, but there's so many different newsletters. I don't know if we
maybe just have a newsletters
generally. Jenna does a massive newsletter to everyone rec oriented, and yeah, everybody's doing a newsletter. So I don't know. I don't know if we want to know about the pleasantries.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's potentially a question for the group, whether that's something. I see a couple hands up. Mark.
So I think this is another asterisk kind of section. we absolutely would love to learn all of this, and you can go all the way through to question 22, I think, in terms of thinking about the asterisk and figuring out which of these are going to really help us make a decision. I'm not sure how much guidance we really get out of here.
Yep.
Important, critical for council and programming activities, but I'm not sure in terms of the decisions that we're going to make. Right through to even to 22. I mean, I'd love to hear what folks say about 22, especially across different generations.
Yeah.
But again, I don't know that it's going to change anything that we do.
Yeah, I can get on board with that, Mark. The piece about, where people find information, I think that's helpful to you all in terms of your continued outreach about this project and how you're communicating with people about what's going on and how it's developing. But that would be my only suggestion. So I can get on board with eliminating 19 through 22. John Sasso and then Jenna. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say something similar. 18, I kind of like the 18. It does help us with directing where we should be communicating. 19 through 21, I kind of view as, take or leave, but they're certainly not things we need. I think 22 we need to delete regardless. I think we talked a little bit about it last time. I think we had a couple lines that people could provide information, and we kind of, nixed that. So
yes, we did do that.
I think without a doubt, that one I would definitely get rid of, but I think that's fine.
Okay, so the current so we'll hear from Jenna and Marilyn and then talk about cutting. Jenna?
Yeah, so I see the Town of Reading website, and I didn't know if we could pluralize that and put town websites, because Recreation has their own website, the Reading Library has their own website, Reading Public Schools has Edline and their own community ed department. So didn't know whether that would be a good suggestion.
Yeah, yes. I mean, the answer is yes. The other question is whether we care to distinguish any of those, but I think that's probably a task that's too complicated for this effort. But yes, we can certainly pluralize that. Thank you. Marilyn?
Wonder if we want to ask, where would you prefer to find updates about this project? We've got the link now on the website, but that's one place, but many people probably don't know that exists, even though we put it on the postcard. Hopefully some people got the message and it will gradually grow, but I think knowing how to best inform people about what's going on and alert them to future surveys, decisions, meeting with whatever would be helpful to this committee.
If I could just add to that, I'm wondering if we'd be better off telling them the places that the information will be available, as opposed to asking them.
You could tell them and ask them to prioritize, but I guess it doesn't matter if we're going to put it in all of them. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So one proposal would be we dump this whole section and we add maybe at the end, for more information about recalc, go to this website or contact this person. And we sort of just eliminate this entire section, which I'm okay with if the group feels that way. The other alternative would be to keep 18, dump 19 through 22, and we can still add the website link at the end. Maybe we do that for now and we see how we are doing on length at our test run. Okay, so we're dumping. Okay. So we're dumping 19 through 22. We'll keep, I don't know what I just said, keep 18 for now, but we'll put a star by it and we'll revisit. Okay, caregiving, I couldn't bring myself to not include something about caregiving, but I can be persuaded. Anyway, it's just such a powerful thing. But anyway, so we ask about, do you now or have you in the last year provided this care? Yes or no, and then how hard it was. This was another way for me to, my rationale for keeping it beyond being who I am is that implication for support, for respite, for that kind of space where somebody, so if we're adding the question about adult day programs up in the question prior, as we discussed, I would be okay eliminating this question as well if people felt like it was anyway. I recognize we want to stay on target with our missions, so I would be fine to dump this as long as we have a question about people's desire for respite. Anybody wanna, does that sound fine to me? Does anybody object to that strategy, to dumping it and just keeping the respite question?
Again, it's a good data point, but I don't think it's.
I know, it's really, yeah, okay.
Yeah, I can feel it. Right.
I know.
And where we have it above, isn't it I can't remember how we worded it. Is it a priority one?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
this gets into, what you have, your situation, and how many people have this situation. The other one, where it's priorities against things that are their own needs as opposed to caregiver needs, it's more complicated. If we can keep it, I would like to see this one stay, because I think it's something we don't know much about that could potentially have a big impact on the scope of the building and what we have in mind. So.
Yeah, I agree. I guess I think that if we have the respite questions, and we also have, I think, a place where we talk about support groups and things like that, that if people do have this need, they will make those things priorities. And so it will get picked up, so to speak, in other questions without having to ask them directly about their experience. The other thing that it does is, yeah, anyway, it does. One could argue that if we ask this question, we would also need to ask a question about childcare, given that we're asking about both adult day health and childcare. And I think that starts to get a little bit more complicated than we need it to be. So my suggestion would be to cut it and make sure that we have, we have the respite, we have the support groups, and we also have the childcare. We have places where people who have that need have a place to tell us that it's really important to them. Okay. See, now I'm talking myself out of stuff.
I know.
I'm getting punchy. Okay, so then last section is the demographics. We've got
wait.
I forgot 25.
Five.
About an impairment or condition that challenges.
I don't know what that one means. I can think of a million things it could mean. So to get useful information out of it, and it's so broad, your ability to, hang on, I have to adjust this so I can see the whole question. To participate in your community. Are you asking, are they homebound because of it?
We don't really care.
Or are you asking if they've got something that, because they're in a wheelchair, they currently can't use the senior center? It's just such a range here. I don't know.
Well, we don't, it's sort of on purpose that way. It's sort of to just understand whether it's that you need a wheelchair or that you have crippling depression. I mean, it could be anything that limits your ability. It's just trying to understand the extent to which people have a real barrier to accessing the community. One of the things we can do with this question is cross-tab a lot of the other results by it, so we can understand what people who have a limiting condition experience or want or need compared to those who do not have such a condition. So it's really, that would be how I would use it, is to look at how responses differ based on that question.
And just the wording, I think that the training I just got from diversity at the Commonwealth was that impairment isn't the preferred terminology. I think disability actually is, but I couldn't swear to it, but I'm pretty sure. So we need to be sensitive to that.
You just the opposite. You don't want to use the word disability.
That's what, yeah.
Mm.
But I think we could probably just, do you have a condition that challenges your ability?
I would like to see actually this question have a little bit more detail, because it does, it will tell us more about what we might need in this new building, depending upon how many answer the question. So if we were able to put in broad categories, like if you answered yes, we could add choices like mobility issues, hearing issues, vision issues, mental health or other, just so that we could get a sense of what our community is like out there and how that might impact the way that we decide to design and build this building. And I don't think that, if we put in 4 or 5 choices there, if they answer yes, and if they choose not to answer it, that's okay too. But at least it gives us an idea of, for Reading, what some of the issues are that are out there. And it could impact what we are ultimately designing.
think it's a point well taken, and Jenna in the chat is suggesting adding a text box for someone to just write in, you know, sort of what is that condition or that kind of something where people can just sort of explain it, and then we would be able to tabulate that manually. It would take a lot of grad student hours, but we could do it. But I hear what you're saying, especially, you know, we talked earlier about sort of the closed captioning and all of that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Karen,
And I mean, if you just added mobility, vision, hearing, and mental health and other, I mean, that's not too many check boxes to add. And I think it gives us a lot of information on how, what some of the future issues might be.
I agree with Nancy wholeheartedly.
Okay. Karen, you were going to say something?
I was going to say something similar, that the question's so vague, it doesn't give us the information that we really need. What we really want to know is, do they need services for that, which we captured up above. So it either needs to be eliminated and kind of captured on previous questions, or just add more detail as far as what challenges, so that we can figure out what how we can help with that.
Mark? Nope, you're on mute, Mark.
They're not used to keeping myself on mute, sorry, but it's probably better for everybody. So I just in thinking about this question and then just kind of taking a step up, I suddenly realized we didn't ask, why don't you use the center, or why don't you use it more? We haven't asked that directly. We proxy it with, you go to other places.
Well, we did ask it and we dropped it. And it was in part because I felt one length, you know, in terms of trying to, and also that I think we sort of, anyway, it was sort of one of those things where we're looking backward a little bit in terms of, do we care why people don't use the people don't use the Pleasant Street Center because of all the reasons we know people don't use it, and sort of, was that a useful use of space? And so we did drop it. We did have that question, but we did drop it.
So I conveniently forgot.
Well,
but I was thinking through some of what we're hearing from people at the sessions, just and maybe this just kind of guides us into saying it's the right call. But, you know, what would the choices be about why don't you use it more? So not enough space, not enough programs, not enough access, which is the reason why I brought it up here, specific to question 25.
Yeah.
Not enough staff, stigma, and from what I've heard from a couple of sessions recently, not enough men. And again, the men thing I don't think is a space issue. I'm in agreement.
Yeah.
So I just want to make sure that we're getting enough kind of surrounding this. And again, the reason I brought it up here is because with question 25 and participating in the community, I think we probably want to hear from people some stuff about, hey, accessibility is blocking me, or space is blocking me. Somehow that would be really helpful data to have, because we're thinking that that's one of the biggest motivators for the changes we're talking about here.
So when you're talking about blocking me, you're talking about things that block people from participating in the community broadly, or things that are blocking people from using Pleasant Street Center?
I'm thinking of the Pleasant Street Center.
Okay.
That's what I was thinking when I suggested it. It would be the Pleasant Street Center.
Right. So we did.
Or it could be any facilities in town that they use. It could be the library. It could be other things too.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah.
Can I make a comment here?
Yeah, sure.
This question seems buried. It doesn't seem to belong here. It seems like this is an important question to have right at the beginning almost.
Yeah.
It just seems lost in this at the end. Oh, by the way, do you have any challenges?
Yeah, I mean, and that it's true, because it's between the cutting of things and the moving of, we wanted to lift a lot of the stuff that's really important to you guys to the top, so that if people do fall off and don't complete it, we've at least gotten some of the crucial things. But I agree, So would it be, could the plan be that we put back in the question about, have you ever used the Pleasant Street Center? Well, I should say, yeah, yes or no. And if no, why haven't you? And give the number of reasons, which we had including things like, I don't know what goes on there, or I don't feel comfortable, or there's a bunch of other things. So we have that. And then an accessibility would be one of those options. Would that suffice this? And then I think also adding, I do like Nancy's point about this sort of more specific conditions that are limiting people.
Yeah, I take that back, that I was referencing the Pleasant Street Center. I was more thinking that I want a general, some general data about people in the community that have disability conditions or whatever that prevent them from, and going back to what Ron said, it could be the Pleasant Street Center, it could be the library, it could be going to Market Basket, you know, but what are the major problems with people?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that. And so I'm gonna change my thought here. So instead of adding back the Pleasant Street Center question, what if we just make this question better, move it up, and have it be broadly, you know, do you have challenges in accessing public spaces and programs in town? And if yes, what are the reasons? The mental health, the physical mobility, okay, I got a thumbs up from Nancy, we got nods.
Yeah, that's excellent.
Would that, so we would not have the question about Pleasant Street Center, it would just be about accessing the community, but it would be more specific to accessing public buildings and programs. And we would have, if yes, you know, tell us about that condition.
A free form. I would put free form.
Free form?
Yeah, free form. I don't know if I'd have a bunch of check boxes for them.
Well, we would certainly include a free form.
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely have some broad check boxes there.
Yeah.
That's just going to help us.
Yeah, but I think having an option to write it in as well.
Exactly. Yep.
And we haven't mentioned dementia, I think, anywhere in here. It's probably worth making that. I mean, you might consider that mental health, but it's such a big concern among the elderly. I would put it as a separate category as well.
Yep. Okay.
The mental health people don't accept dementia as part
I was
of
going to say it's not mental health, but it is important, and
it
not only that,
definitely needs to be.
Oh, yes. No, I'm agreeing with you.
yeah, I'm in agreement too. And but I also, and you'll also just get a lot of people, nobody wants to, even if they have dementia, they won't they won't tell you, they don't know. But anyway, that's a separate issue. John Sasso.
So I was just, as we were talking about this, trying to think how best to integrate this back into the survey without adding more. What if could we go back and look at question 13 for a minute? So I was wondering if tied to 13, you could say, hey, if you answered unlikely in either of a case, you know, what would the reason be that you know, and there we could add kind of that. So it could kind of be an adjunct to this question here. So it's kind of now tied more directly to what we're asking about, but then also gives folks the opportunity to share, geez, I wouldn't really use it because I'm concerned about X, Y, or Z, or, you know, whatever that might be. So that's why just, you know, a suggestion. I don't know if that really would work because it's not exactly what we're talking about, but I think it ties it together a little bit.
Yeah, and even if we don't directly tie it, I think this is the place for that kind of thing.
I do too.
The real estate is right in terms of where that question should belong, but we can play around with trying to connect it to 13. We may even change the answer options to 13 to make it a little bit clearer. Good point though, John.
Yeah, as 13 is now, I don't see how it would, because then it would be
right. It's a little complicated. Likely.
Yeah.
You know, it's only if you said it was unlikely, whatever. And I think most sentiment of most people is that this question of, you know, the ability challenges that you have to utilize the center is important enough that we really want to have it focused.
Yeah, I mean, I could see changing 13 to, instead of the likely scale, having it just be yes, no, or maybe, and having maybe the no's and the maybes get asked, well, why wouldn't you, or why?
I mean, talking broadly, I mean, what about, parents that say, we're so busy with our kids, we would never be able to get down there. I mean, that's another reason. So,
Yeah.
I mean, it could be a really broad set of reasons why somebody
Sure.
might not.
I don't have, yeah, I have, yes. Okay.
It could even just be not interested. I mean,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
aren't interested, which is
I
fine.
don't, yeah, of course. Of course. Okay, so we will elaborate on the disability question, tie it to using the potential center. We'll work on that. It'll be in the next iteration. And we are not putting back the Pleasant Street Center question, which I think is all fine. Okay. Ron and Nancy, your hands are up. I'm just checking that that's from, no, it's fine. I assumed it was from before. I just don't want anybody to feel like I'm ignoring them.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're dropping, so that deals with 25, then we're into our demographic information. We've got gender identity, we've got age range, we've got employment status, and then we have a question about economic security. Sort of, do you feel like you have the resources you need to meet your basic needs? Which will help us understand that financial stability question, and then 30, which is a sort of a catch-all. Mark, and then Karen.
So 29, again, as it relates to thinking about a senior center, community center, is that providing any information that's helpful to us?
No.
Well, I think one thing I would definitely do with it is look at people who disagree. What I do with that is put people in the two categories. They disagree or strongly disagree, and that I sort of think of that group as economically, fragile. And then I look at what are their needs and their preferences and their thresholds for supporting this versus people who are not in that situation. So really, it just helps you understand your constituents a little bit better in terms of what's going to drive it.
Yeah, cross-referencing.
I think it would help too in understanding space needs you might need at certain hours. We've talked tonight about, well, it makes sense during the day, the kids are in school and the old people go in, but there are, I think, significant numbers of people like myself that virtually never set foot in it because there are no evening hours, whereas a community center might have evening hours, and you might find there are a lot of other seniors in space. You might need to be doing more with a dedicated space if you get people that are working full time.
Yeah.
I personally would asterisk this one. I'm not sure it's getting the same bang for the buck as the others, but
okay.
If other people feel differently.
Okay. Karen?
On the gender identity question.
Sure.
If you're transgendered man, you identify as a man. So I'm not sure why transgender is there as an option.
Well, I think it's important to the person who's a transgender. I mean, they're not just going to say man, and certainly how they're treated in society is different.
Yeah, I think it's about sort of how that. So I guess the question would be: does anybody identify as as transgender? Is that something like that someone would identify themselves as? Perhaps if they're transitioning or they haven't transitioned. That's, I think, the reason it's in there is to just provide an opportunity for people, but I'm not. So your suggestion would be to not include that as an option and to just have man, woman, non-binary or other. Is that right?
Right. So from what I understand, if you're a transgendered woman, you would consider yourself a woman, or a transgendered man considers themselves a man. I don't think they would consider themselves transgendered. Just from the training that I have gotten.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
Yeah. That makes sense to me, and I'm predominantly just want to make sure everybody that there's a, people feel like there's a place for them to identify. So if we think that between having the place to say I identify as a woman, I identify as a man, I identify non-binary, or if there's an other.
Why is this question here?
Yeah, I was gonna ask that. How will that affect the building?
Well, it won't, I mean, it's really just more of a political correctness in terms of how we're identifying the gender of the respondent. And
But why do we care?
To understand who completed your survey and who the opinion, because one of the things I think we want to be careful about is when we get the data back, we want to think about how the data is biased, because it will be biased in terms of who completed it. And so if it's all women, then making concrete plans about a building that's based on the perspective of a bunch, it's just trying to understand the sort of the bias of the survey. It's the same thing with why we ask about age and other things, economic security. It's just to be able to say, this is a relatively balanced perspective of your community, or it's not. Or we heard from a whole lot of people who are in their 18 to 29-year-old group, and that's what they want, but it's not what the community wants. So it's really about the representation of who we hear from. So I do think it's important to keep. The other way that I ask this question in other projects is to just simply ask, please select your gender, period, male, female, other. Which allows people to, they're selecting their gender, it's their choice how they just answer that question. And they have, instead of woman or man, we use sort of the male, female version of that. And then we give them a place to tell us if there's another way that another gender that they identify with. So that would be a simpler way of asking it. Jenna?
I had a question on the age range one. I didn't know whether it would be beneficial. We did this with the Birch Meadow Master Plan, and I'm not sure if other surveys have done it, but we also included a question on the household ages. So, how many people in your household are
under 18 or
right, or how many in your household are seniors, things like that. I don't know whether that was valid information. If you're looking for community as a whole, you might want to know how many people don't have kids that are answering, or how many people do have kids, or something like that.
Yeah, I'm not sure in this case that would be, so to, but I could be swayed otherwise. So back to the gender question, would people feel, would it be more clear to simply, instead of go into gender identity, but to just talk about, please select your gender, have male, female, other, and have people have a place to write in?
Yeah, yes.
Okay.
Can I suggest, why don't we kind of see what best practice is right now? And instead of us defining it, let's see what best practice is and just use what that is. I was typing feverishly in the background just to grab either Qualtrics or SurveyMonkey to see what their standard questions show at this point as most recent.
Yeah.
But I think we could quickly resolve that.
Yeah, although I think it's quickly changing and fast. I think there's a lot of, I think it'd be hard to find a best practice at the moment, but we can certainly find one that we think will work for us. Okay. And then on the age range, so the question is whether we care about if there are, multi-generations in a household, that kind of thing. Personally, I think it's nice to know, but I'm not sure it impacts.
I think it comes up with some of the service, what things they say that they need, right? Like
if they need childcare, the assumption is that they have some childcare responsibilities. Yes, it does not, so I think keeping it specific to the respondent, how old are you, period, would be my suggestion. Employment is pretty straightforward, I think, and we do allow people to check all that apply if they are retired and also work part-time, that kind of thing. They're able to check more than one. And then I do think the economic security question is important to understand. And then there's this sort of catch all about additional comments for people to write in their thoughts. We do have my contact information if people have questions about the survey. This would be the place where I would suggest somewhere down here saying, for more information about Recalc, go to the website or contact someone. Does that seem like what people would want to do is include the,
Would it be a website and QR code or?
yeah, yeah. Is the website sufficient? Do we want to put a contact person there? Okay. Okay, so we'll just
Put Mark on there. He likes to get calls.
like to stay up till 9:30 talking about this stuff. I know. Okay, so we'll just put something at the end about, you know, if you want more information about recalc, you can go to the site. Okay.
Caitlin?
Thank you. Oh, yes.
I know you're going to have people who can do the survey on the phone with people if they want.
Yeah.
Do we have someplace that explicitly makes that clear that that's an option? I know it says at the top, if you need assistance, you can call, but my thinking would be, oh, that's someone who's going to help me fill out the form online. That's not what I want. And I wouldn't imagine that meant I could just verbally be interviewed on the phone and someone else would fill out the form.
Okay, so would you prefer to, so you'd want to say something like, if you want to do it over the phone with someone?
If you'd like to be interviewed and we'll fill out the form for you, please call.
Okay. Yeah, it's not, I mean, it is, yeah, okay. John Sasso? Oh,
I'm sorry, I need to interrupt. I apologize. Can you guys hear me?
yes.
John, I need to run. I have a hard stop at 9:30. I know there was a topic on the agenda tonight that Fidel wanted me to bring up, but I just can't stay on any longer. So, Mark, I don't know.
Bring
if
it
you
up,
guys-
John. No
Okay.
worries.
All right, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John.
Thanks, everybody else. Have a good night.
Yep, thank you. Okay, I will work on this statement, Marilyn, to make it clear. I don't want, yeah, I'll try to make it as a little bit more clear.
Okay. 'Cause I think you're going to get a lot of people, and we heard it last night too. They were saying, you know, people, and I know they were doing more surveys on the ARPA one too. Older people are not, you know, there are many older people, or probably younger ones as well, who are not going to be willing to do this, but would probably participate in a phone interview with someone else filling it out. So they just need to clearly understand that's an option with this.
Yeah, and I just want to be clear, it's not necessarily an interview, it's really just someone clicking the buttons and reading the questions.
All right, so just however you want to word it.
Yeah, I just want to be careful, it's not.
I understand, just so they understand that they don't have to click on anything, that if they'd like, they can have someone do it for you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay, that gets us to the end. So we got through the survey. I'll make these edits. I'll get it up online, a cleaner version, and circulate that link. And I'll get sort of the rundown on next meetings and things like that from Jean and Kevin. Appreciate you guys so much. This was very helpful. It's getting better. It's really people, you're putting in the work to make it right, and it's great to be a part of that. So I appreciate your time.
Status of focus groups?
Thank
before you go?
you.
Oh, yeah.
If I could just jump in on the focus groups. So we have something ready to go. I haven't sent it around yet. We may have to modify time, date, but so I know we were pretty much ready to go with a date in June, but I've got some feedback preliminarily that there's some conflicts with that. So Caitlin, you and I'll work through maybe some alternatives.
Yeah, but we've got lists of people between what Jean and Kevin have sent us and what we've sort of gathered from Amy and folks in town. So I think we're good on sort of invites, and we're honing in on some dates, trying to get them done in June.
All right, thank you. Then Mark, is that my understanding? You're going to address the final issue as far as the request for proposal? Okay. Want to do that
Sorry.
now?
Yeah, sorry, I was having trouble. I think what's going on is my mouse batteries are low, and I pointed the unmute and the mouse jumps somewhere else. Sorry. So the item that was put onto the agenda is a discussion about a request for proposal for additional senior center space to lease over the course of the next potentially 3 to 5 years. And the reasoning behind this, and the reason Fidel asked to have it put on, is that the ARPA committee made a recommendation to support $900,000 in funds, which is going to go to the select board for a vote next Tuesday. And one of the elements included in that is the notion of short-term lease space. In addition, John Sasso, and it's too bad he wasn't able to stay on, but John Sasso brought up to town meeting an instructional motion. And one of the key elements of his instructional motion were to talk about the near-term needs of the senior community. So the town is thinking about, okay, how do we pursue that? What's the best way to do that? And the thinking is to issue a request for proposals, an RFP, talking about what some near-term needs could look like as certainly something to supplement where we are now. It might be the bridge to get us from now to a new center, assuming that a new center actually is going to happen. But in any event, it deals with needs that we have today. Most of Recalc's efforts, I'd say all of Recalc's efforts, have been focused on longer term, what would be required for a new center. And so this is something that came up. And I think the reason why Fidel suggested putting it here and talk to John about it a little bit to me is so that there's not a surprise coming to the members of Recalc or others who are kind of watching and listening to what's going on here about this idea of thinking about the near term, from now, well, assuming that, the select board still has to take a vote to see what's going to happen with those ARPA funds, but the notion of looking at the near term. So that was the reason for bringing it up here, and to see if folks had comments or feedback on that, because it relates to Recalc, and it relates also because we've talked about in our mission for Recalc that when we complete the survey, when we have the data, when we've done the benchmarking, we bring all those things together and make a recommendation to the community on how to proceed. And that time frame is probably not before November. So it's November or later. So, rather than waiting until we have any data to actually see if there might be some action we can take. Again, all this pending select board action next week, but to kind of move things ahead more quickly. And if you didn't watch, what was discussed, actually, Jean, you sent all the information out to this group also, I think, didn't you, in terms of the presentation? So you all know or can see from that presentation what was proposed. So this is to kind of move things ahead, again, based on, once the select board takes some action on Tuesday of next week. So any questions, comments, thoughts, ideas?
Well, comment is that it would have been my preference that both Council on Aging and Recalc had some opportunity to discuss it in advance that we really didn't know, because I didn't know, except from our reading in the newspaper. Also, I would have thought this would have been more appropriate for the Council on Aging. I understand that there's a nexus between, what the Recalc charge is, but I don't see that our charge includes this immediate 3 to 5 year lease and whatever is going to be going on.
I think we're in agreement. I think it's more just to share so that you don't have to read other things in the paper.
Yeah,
I know what's up and why.
Yeah, Mark, I don't understand the connection between what you're suggesting and what Jean presented at the ARPA meeting with her slides, and she's apportioned out how to spend the money, which also includes leasing. So I guess I don't understand what you're proposing here. How is it different than what Jean proposed at the ARPA meeting?
I'll give you my impression, and then Jean, please do the same. The connection is that thinking about what those needs might look like and asking people who have space in the community to let us know what they'd be willing to do. That's what this request for proposal would be about. So is that not
Yeah,
making sense?
yeah, I guess so. And
It's
yeah.
not precluding, what it's doing is it's trying to kind of promote the activity by getting some information from folks. If we say we're looking for X at X square feet, different times of day, how do we do that? Well, a request for proposal is one of the ways that we do that.
No, yeah, I understand that. So I guess my question to Jean is, how does that fit in with everything that you've suggested to the ARPA committee and that you've worked on with the Council on Aging as well as elder service staff?
Yeah, this is John Sasso's idea that
Yeah.
I was surprised when it came up at town meeting. It was an instructional motion. So I haven't been involved in it. The outline that I presented for the ARPA funds was to, lease church basements for programs and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Over, a considerable amount of time. But I think what John Sasso had mentioned early on in one of the very first meetings was, we should not even be in the Pleasant Street Center, and we should be, renting space down at over by Market Basket, like the library did. And I don't know what something like 20-something thousand a month was the rent when the library was in there. So that's a totally different idea than, what I was suggesting is let's, go into church basements and have more activities and that kind of thing. So it's like Mark said, this is like a near term, almost supplemental space to the Pleasant Street Center in a much bigger way than what I was describing. Or maybe it's instead of the Pleasant Street Center. I know at one point
I would just be concerned how this all meshes together, because I like what you really presented at the ARPA meeting. So, and I'm just kind of confused about how, as long as what Mark is talking about, in my mind, as long as what Mark is talking about is compatible with what you suggested, and it all works together, then it makes sense. Otherwise, I guess I don't understand.
So same team.
Same team.
Same team.
Okay. All right.
There may be different opportunities that can come around, but same team. So the town is who will be issuing the RFP to gather input. It doesn't necessitate a specific action, but it gets stuff hopefully coming in our direction, ideas in terms of what we might do. Separately, there was a discussion about the RMLD building. And it may be that, well, I think they stated they don't necessarily use all the space or need all the space in that building, or they might be able to use other spaces. And that might open up an opportunity. But one of the things we want to do is kind of hear what those opportunities could look like. And that's really what that's about. And tonight isn't really kind of, don't do it, yes, do it, whatever. It's more kind of talking about, hey, this is something that we wanted everybody to know about. And because somebody could come out and say, wait a second, aren't we waiting until November before we do anything, related to any kind of space? And I think the answer to that would be, well, there's a discussion of basements and other things. And there's a discussion of finding out what opportunities might be out there where people could share with us, hey, I have space and I'd be willing to let you use it for, a modest amount of money per month.
Mark?
Yeah.
The question I have is just how the specs would be written for the RFP. I like Jean's strategy of piloting, and we try stuff, and if it's a huge hit, well, we know there is interest and it could work, and we recapture a lot of data through Jean's plan, as well as helping alleviate the immediate need. What Recalc is doing is, in many of what that my brain has gone to sleep. The feasibility study, I would assume, would help spec out, well, what you need is 20,000 square feet all on one level with X, Y, Z, or whatever it might conclude. I don't know how you could write an RFP without knowing that.
So all true. The issue that I'd suggest to you, however, is what you're talking about means waiting until next year before kind of assessing some of the things, other than the potential of renting basements and things like that. And it may be there are other opportunities, and it'd be great.
I'm not opposed to it. I'm one of the ones that always says just move everybody out of the senior center, just let go of the ties that bind us and move into, you know, Market Basket or wherever.
Yeah.
But you need specs to do an RFP.
So the reason why that is described as it is it's not supposed to be the solution that lasts forever. But there is some period of time between now and let's say a new center.
Yeah.
Where there could be different kinds of needs. And you know, this process may not yield any information, or it may yield some great information. But rather than recalc kind of saying, wait a second, what's going on? You know, we want to do the feasibility study first. It's yes and yes. It's not A and not B. It's yes and yes. And this is just kind of a near term kind of taking a look at it.
Yeah, maybe we'll find someplace it's a wonderful solution that, you know, just hasn't occurred to anybody.
Yeah, I guess the library was a good case, a good test case. You know, that's sort of like.
I agree with the yes and yes. At least in my mind, it got a little confused. In other words, we shouldn't wait until see whether or not there's going to be a new senior center, or even if we do decide there's going to be a senior center or a community center, to do something because there are needs now. So that no question in my mind. So that's good. And John Sassler's point in doing that. The thing though, at the end of John Sassler's presentation at town meeting for people who weren't there, he kind of left it open that, well, then maybe we could save money and wouldn't need a new center.
So that's not part of what's happening with an RFP or not an RFP.
Yeah.
That's not touching the topic at all. This is just meant as saying, hey, if there's going to be a new kind of center, it's a period of time before that's going to exist. We will need additional space. What are some options? Right. And there's a feasibility study, and we'll know more about kind of, you know, how many square feet we think we're going to need long-term and for what purposes and things like that. The issue is that's out here in time, and we're today. And so we're trying to just gather some more input, see what might be possible. And again, might yield some interesting things. It might yield absolutely nothing. But I can tell you that, you know, discussions with the facility down at RMLD, you know, it may be that there's nothing there that could make any sense, or quite the opposite. And this doesn't presuppose anything. It just says, let's go out and see what folks say. It may be that there's a building owned by a church or whatever that comes back and says, you know what, we're looking for a few years lease of this building. And it'd be great to know what that is.
Maybe something comes out and they realize you could renovate and own one of these. Would that be possible to come out of this?
I think anything's possible. The starting point, though, really is to have this request for proposal so that we start getting some input and evaluate. And not excluding, you know, smaller steps and starting that way. That's great too. We're just trying to start a discussion, start thinking about, okay, what can we do in the near term? What can we even do in the medium term?
But if I was confused, I think hopefully others.
Yeah. Sorry that so all this kind of happened quickly in the last few days.
So who's writing the RFP? I guess that's my question.
I'm not sure exactly.
Okay.
So the band leader certainly is Fidel. And then obviously we'll be in coordination with everybody else in terms of what and how and when and who.
This is a good problem to have. I'll just say that. Right?
Yeah, I think that, you know, folks, I think there's a lot going on right now.
Yeah.
A lot. And I think that's good. You know, not letting things go out of control, obviously, but I think there's a lot of activity. And, you know, it was great. And, you know, John was very supportive last night at the ARPA committee meeting. And, you know, folks, the select board will be discussing this on Tuesday night. You know, if you're interested in either watching or participating, that's great also. You know, the ARPA committee suggested $900,000 per Gene's proposal. And, you know, if you go back a couple of months, it was discussions of let's get in front of this committee to see if there are some things that they would consider for near term for the senior community. And I think we're seeing good support, and I think that's great. And you know, my view is full speed ahead.
Yeah, and what's nice about it is it's short term, but now you're providing more services to the community, and it's hard to take away those services later on. So it actually builds the story even better for a community center down the road. Right?
Yeah. It's hard to take it away, but I think what we're talking about, what Gene proposed and what we're all thinking about here is that we know that there's a case. We're going to find some of the better ways to do it. And then there is going to be required additional support in the operating budget to do most anything we're talking about, whether it's only services or services plus space or whatever. It's going to require ongoing operating budget support. And we need to build that. We need to build support and consensus for that.
Yeah, one thing I'd like to try, and I haven't even really discussed this with staff or Caitlin very much, but when we do the first focus group with town staff, I'd like to try doing it down at Bertucci's in the function room, because we got some information back and they don't charge to use the room. Their price point is very modest for lunch. You just show up, do the focus group right there, and it's nice and easy. That's the model for these supplemental services. We don't have the building, we don't really have the staff, but we can do things like this in a different way, and even including our own focus groups for this project.
All right.
Yeah, I think the next meeting should be at Bertucci's. That's
John, can I ask one other question?
Sure.
And it's more for Gene, Kevin, and Jenna. Does everyone here know about roles and things and what's going on? Is that an appropriate thing to mention? People, who's doing what, who's on first?
I mean, I think that this, like you said, Mark, this is so new. It's really just unfolded in the very short, you know, the last, I don't even know, week or whatever. And I've had my head attached to the computer trying to get this presentation done. So I'm in a fog, to be honest with you. It's 10 o'clock at night. I don't think I'm going to make a lot of sense.
No worries.
The end. We'll figure it out. We'll just like everything else, we'll all come together.
Back my question. I didn't.
No,
I said it to Gene before the meeting actually got going, so I'll say it in front of the group, is that she did a great job.
Thank you.
She acknowledged that, you know, other staff were involved and everything else, but Gene did it, and it was a major plus.
Mhm.
It's a team effort, but thank you very much for your kind words. Whenever you guys are ready to adjourn, I'm ready to go to bed.
You and the dog.
Okay, next meeting, this one's tentatively scheduled for the 8th that I see in the minutes. Was that tentative or was that absolute?
On my calendar.
Do you have it on your calendar?
I do, yeah.
Okay, all right, so then.
It's on my calendar.
All right, so then we'll take that. So then I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Okay, we'll take a vote. I'll take a vote. John Parsons.
Yes.
Nora Bucko.
Yes.
Mark Doxer.
Yes.
Ron Assini.
Yes.
John O'Neill. Yes. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.
Have a good evening, everyone.
Thank you,
Thanks
everyone.
all.
You too. Thank you.
Bye.